The following compilation features unsettling and spine-chilling tales sourced from Reddit's horror communities. Reader discretion is strongly advised. These narratives may contain graphic descriptions, psychological distress, and themes that could unsettle sensitive individuals. Proceed with caution, as immersion into these eerie stories may provoke fear, unease, and sleep disturbances. Enter this realm of Reddit's creepy horror stories at your own risk, as the line between reality and the macabre may blur within these chilling narratives. Story 1. The Trickster's Veil. As far back as I can remember, I'd always been passionate about the great outdoors. My love for the wilderness began when I joined the Scouts, exploring the diverse landscapes of Southern California, Nevada, Arizona, and Utah. I was never a huge fan of the dry, barren landscapes, but camping provided a much-needed escape from the monotony of Orange County suburbia. The first time I visited the Pacific Northwest, I was enchanted. The scenery was breathtaking, majestic mountains, lush fields, and meandering rivers. It was clear that anyone who praised the desert's beauty had never laid eyes on the Cascades. Seeing grass and wildflowers growing without irrigation was practically a revelation. When I was old enough, I moved to Washington State. Immersing myself in nature every weekend, my adventures took me hiking through dense forests, camping by serene lakes, and occasionally taking mushrooms under peaceful waterfalls. I joined several online forums dedicated to outdoor enthusiasts. One community that particularly fascinated me was the Northwest Tomb Raiders. This group of history buffs and thrill seekers was dedicated to uncovering artifacts, whether Native American relics or treasures hidden in modern ruins. Many members were collectors, fencing their finds to museums and archaeologists, which made it a rather profitable side gig, should you be lucky enough. In the fall of 2009, an intriguing post appeared on the forum. A user named Locke claimed to have discovered a cache of artifacts with Scandinavian origins. He couldn't carry everything back due to the treacherous terrain and his age, so he shared the coordinates, hoping someone else could retrieve the items. I scrolled down to see a few posts of people planning to loot it in the spring. When the paths have reopened, one user, Patagonia, planned on going as early as possible. Excited by the prospect, I gathered my two friends, Carl and Noah, for the expedition. They weren't as enthusiastic about camping as I was, but after I told them how much a single arrowhead goes for on the black market, they were on board. It was the start of winter now, which had its advantages and disadvantages. On the plus side, the rangers would have a harder time spotting us. On the downside, the harsh conditions posed a serious challenge for two inexperienced hikers. I must have blown about $4,000 at REI on gear for them, justifying it with the knowledge of how much more I would make with 2 extra packs. That is, of course, assuming there really were as many artifacts as Locke had said, and Patagonia hadn't beaten me there. The journey began like any other. We met in the pre-dawn darkness and went over our supplies, ensuring we had everything we needed. By mid-morning, we were on our way, my pickup truck winding up the mountain paths. The roads of Olympic National Park were the epitome of the raw, untamed beauty of the Pacific Northwest. They snake through ancient forests, where towering Douglas firs and western hemlocks create a verdant canopy overhead. Mist clings to the trees, giving the landscape an ethereal quality. Occasionally, the forest would open up to reveal breathtaking vistas of snow-capped peaks and deep, shadowy valleys. As we climbed higher, the landscape grew increasingly desolate. The dense forest thinned out, replaced by rugged terrain and jagged rock formations. The air grew colder, and the first flurries of snow began to fall, dusting the ground in a thin, white layer. The road became narrower and more treacherous, winding precariously along the edge of steep cliffs. Finally, a road closure blockade signaled the end of our journey in the truck. We unloaded 3 dirt bikes, 1 mine, 2 rentals, and continued up the trail. The bikes roared to life, carrying us several more miles into the wilderness. The trail twisted and turned, cutting through dense underbrush and overfallen logs. The snow began to fall more heavily, blanketing the forest floor and muffling the sound of our engines. The world around us grew quieter, more isolated. Eventually, the snow became too deep to traverse by bike. We dismounted and prepared to continue on foot. The silence of the forest was profound, broken only by the occasional rustle of branches in the wind. I checked my modern GPS, its screen displaying the coordinates and a relief map of our destination. The cold air bit into our cheeks as we trudged through the snow-laden forest. The silence was almost oppressive, broken only by the crunch of our footsteps and the occasional call of distant wildlife. The GPS indicated we were close to our destination, but the dense underbrush and uneven terrain made progress slow. Suddenly, Carl's excited whisper cut through the stillness. "Hey, look at that." He pointed to a small, furry creature ambling through the trees. It took a moment to realize what it was, a bear cub, innocently exploring its surroundings. My heart sank. "Carl, get back," I hissed, my voice low but urgent. "Where there's a cub, there's a..." Before I could finish, a massive shape exploded from the trees. The mother bear, easily 3 times the size of the cub, charged at Carl with a ferocity. She was a blur of dark fur and powerful muscles, her roar echoing through the forest. "Run," I yelled, but it was too late. The bear was upon Carl, swiping at him with her massive paws. He screamed as he fell to the ground, the bear towering over him. Desperation and adrenaline surged through me. I grabbed the nearest heavy branch and swung it at the bear, hoping to distract her. Noah joined in, shouting and waving his arms. We had to be careful. One wrong move and she would turn on us. The bear snarled, turning her attention away from Carl for just a moment. It was enough for him to scramble backwards, clutching his bleeding arm. "We have to get him out of here," I shouted to Noah, who nodded. Fear etched on his face. The bear, still enraged, seemed torn between attacking us and protecting her cub. Using the brief respite, we hauled Carl to his feet. His face was white, and he was clearly in shock. Blood soaked his sleeve, dripping onto the snow. "There's a ranger station about 2 miles from here," I said, my voice shaking. "We need to get him there, now." We half-carried, half-dragged Carl through the forest, every shadow and sound heightening our paranoia. Finally, after what felt like forever, the small, wooden structure of the ranger station came into view. We had been avoiding the rangers to keep our expedition secret, but now it was our only hope. Pounding on the door, I prayed for a quick response. The door creaked open, and a weathered face appeared. "What happened?" the ranger demanded, taking in the sight of Carl's bloodied form. "Bear attack," I gasped. "We need help." The ranger's expression shifted from suspicion to urgency. "Get him inside. We've got a first aid kit and a radio." As we eased Carl onto a makeshift bed, the ranger inspected his wounds. "You're lucky," he said after a moment. "The cuts are deep, but they missed any major arteries. He'll need stitches, but we can handle that here. No need for an airlift." The ranger's face darkened as he turned to me. "What the hell are you boys doing out here?" I hesitated. We were just exploring." The ranger's eyes narrowed, his anger palpable. "Exploring? In a restricted area? In the middle of winter? Are you out of your minds?" He worked quickly and efficiently, cleaning and stitching Carl's wounds. Carl winced but stayed silent, his eyes closed in pain. "Do you have any idea how dangerous it is out here?" the ranger continued, his voice rising. "The storm, the wildlife, this area is off limits for a reason. You should have known better," he said, pushing a finger into my chest. "We'll stay here for the night," he continued. "The storm's getting worse, and it's too dangerous to move him now. We'll reassess in the morning, and count yourself lucky I don't arrest your asses." Night fell quickly, the storm outside growing more ferocious with each passing minute. The howling wind battered the small ranger station, and the walls creaked under the pressure. We huddled in the main room, the tension thick in the air. The ranger looked at us sternly. "I need to check the perimeter and make sure everything is secure. There are things out there you don't want to encounter." especially in this storm. Things? What do you mean? Noah asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The ranger's expression hardened. Just stay put. No matter what you see or hear, do not leave this cabin. Understood? We nodded, the seriousness in his tone leaving no room for argument. We'll stay put, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. The ranger grabbed his coat and shotgun. I'll be back in an hour. Do not leave this cabin. With that, he opened the door and stepped into the raging storm, disappearing into the darkness. As soon as the door closed, I turned to Noah. We need to go. Now. Noah's eyes widened. Are you crazy? He said to stay put. If we wait until morning, we'll be escorted out of here and lose our chance. This might be our only opportunity to find those artifacts. Noah hesitated with uncertainty. But what about Carl? He'll be fine here. The ranger can take care of him. We have to do this now. Reluctantly, Noah nodded. All right, let's take what we can and go. We quickly looted extra gear from the cabin. I checked the GPS one last time before we slipped out into the storm, the cold wind battering us. The snow fell heavily, obscuring our vision as we slogged through the forest. The ranger was nowhere in sight as we made our way towards our destination, each step filled with trepidatious excitement. The storm began to die down as we approached the coordinates. We stepped into a clearing where the undisturbed snow lay like a pristine white blanket. In the center stood an ancient, weathered stone altar, encircled by intricate wooden carvings, delicate metalwork, and beautifully crafted statues. The sight was breathtaking, a treasure trove, a veritable museum of paganism. Noah and I exchanged glances, our eyes wide with amazement. Do you see this? I whispered, barely able to contain my excitement. We're going to be rich, Noah replied, his voice trembling with awe. These must be worth a fortune. We approached cautiously, as if the vision before us might disappear. The craftsmanship was stunning. I reached out to touch a carved wooden idol, marveling at the detail. This is incredible, I said, my voice barely audible. We began to load our packs with as many artifacts as we could carry, each one more exquisite than the last. It was beyond our wildest dreams. We were so engrossed in our task that we didn't notice the small figure watching us from the ridge. It wasn't until I turned to leave that I saw her. A young girl, maybe 8 years old, stood there, her blue eyes wide with curiosity. She was dressed in simple, rustic clothing, her blonde, straight hair blowing gently in the wind. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Noah, I whispered urgently, nudging him. Look. He turned, his eyes following my gaze. What the? He muttered, his voice trailing off. The girl took a tentative step forward, her eyes fixed on the items in our hands. There was no fear in her gaze, only a quiet intensity that made my skin crawl. Who are you? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She tilted her head slightly. My name is Sigyn. What are you doing out here? Sigyn, Noah asked, his voice shaky. I live here. You live here? I echoed, incredulous. Is there anyone else around? Yes, she whispered. Where? Noah demanded, looking around nervously. Everywhere, she said with a giggle. The way she said it, so matter-of-factly, bothered me deeply. Noah and I exchanged a look, both of us trying to figure out what to do next. We can't take her back to the ranger, Noah started. We'll lose everything. I nodded, my mind racing. Sigyn, I said slowly, we need to know who else is here. Can you help us? She looked at me with her piercing blue eyes, then said, I'm sorry. For what? Noah asked. For what's going to happen to you, she replied, her voice tinged with sadness. You need to tell us what's going on, Noah said, grabbing her arm roughly. Why are you out here alone? She looked up at him, unperturbed. I am not alone, she said softly. Before we could press her further, a loud guttural mooing sound echoed through the clearing. We turned towards the direction the girl had come from. And there, emerging from the shadows, was the silhouette of an elk. As it approached, my stomach dropped. Its body was a grotesque amalgamation of life and decay. Its skull was fully exposed, the eye sockets dark and empty. Large patches of its ribs were visible. The flesh around them rotted away. The elk's movements were slow and deliberate, its head swaying as if in a trance. It walked directly towards us, its hollow eyes fixed on Sigyn. The closer it got, the more the stench of death filled the air, a nauseating mix of decay and earth. I fought the urge to retch. Sigyn stood up, her expression calm. The monster sniffed her gently, its nostrils flaring. Without a word, she climbed onto its back, mounting it like a horse. It was a surreal and horrifying scene ripped straight from a nightmare. As she settled onto the elk, she looked back at us. "A thief in the night shall reap what he sows," she said, her voice carrying an otherworldly echo. "Beware the price of stolen dreams." With that, the beast turned and began to walk away, Sigyn riding it into the shadows of the forest. We stood there, frozen in place. The realization that we were in far over our heads began to sink in. This started to feel like a trap. "We need to get out of here," my voice trembling. "Now." We turned to leave, our packs heavy with the pilfered goods. But as we took our first steps, the forest around us seemed to come alive. Shadows moved among the trees, and whispers floated on the wind. I quickened my pace, glancing nervously over my shoulder. "Did you hear that?" Noah asked sharply. "Just keep moving," I commanded. A figure emerged from the shadows, blocking our path. It was a man, tall and gaunt, his eyes burning with an intense light. "Where do you think you're going?" he asked, his voice cold and menacing. "We're leaving," I stammered. "We didn't mean any harm." The man smirked, and with a swift motion, he raised his hand. More figures appeared, closing in on us from all sides. We were surrounded. "Run!" I shouted, shoving Noah forward. We sprinted through the forest, branches whipping at our faces and legs. The figures pursued us, their footsteps silent and relentless. Noah stumbled and fell, his pack spilling open, statues scattered across the ground, glinting in the moonlight. "Help!" he cried, scrambling to gather the items. "Leave them," I shouted, pulling him to his feet. "We have to keep moving." But it was too late, their hands seizing us. I struggled, kicking and thrashing, but their grips were too strong. They forced us to the ground, binding our hands with rough, coarse ropes. "Please," I begged, "don't hurt us." The man who had first appeared stepped forward, his eyes gleaming with amusement. "A thief in the night," he mocked. They dragged us through the forest, the trees closing in around us like a cage. We were at their mercy. In the distance, I could see the elk standing at the edge of the clearing, Sigyn still astride its back. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of pity. But then they turned away, disappearing into the shadows once more. We were dragged into the heart of the forest, our struggles futile against the unyielding grip of our captors. As we broke through the tree line, a massive bonfire came into view, its flames licking the night sky. Shadows danced around the clearing, cast by the flickering light. A woman stood at the forefront, her presence commanding. Her eyes were milk white, devoid of pupils, and her long, flowing white hair cascaded down her back. She was completely naked, her skin pale and marked with intricate symbols. Atop her head, she wore an elk skull, its antlers extending like eerie, skeletal fingers. She beat a drum emblazoned with more of the same cryptic symbols, each thud resonating deep within my chest. Around the fire, about 24 people stood, all drinking from crude, horned cups. Their faces were solemn, eyes fixed on the woman as she led them in a haunting chant. The atmosphere was thick with a mix of reverence and intoxication. We were forced to our knees before the woman, who paused her drumming to look down at us. Her gaze was haunting, as if she could see into the very depths of our souls. "Who are you?" Noah demanded, his voice trembling. The woman ignored him. Raising her arms to the sky, the chanting grew louder, the rhythm of the drum faster and more frenzied. The air around us seemed to vibrate with energy, the flames of the bonfire growing higher and more intense. I glanced at Noah, fear mirrored in his eyes. The woman began to speak, her voice low and melodic, but filled with power, in a language I couldn't understand. Suddenly, she stopped. Lowering her arms, the chanting ceased, and in silence fell over the clearing. She looked directly at me, her white eyes unblinking. "En tjuv I natten skördar vad han sår. Akta dig för drömmar som du stjäl och får." Hans skratt bevakar lundens gömda stig, där skuggor sveper över skogens liv. För varje stulet andetag och svek måste en tjuv möta sitt smärtsamma ödelek. Tricksterns vilja, vår ande här, så i hens nåd våra liv bär. I was terrified and confused. She started again, softer, in a way I could understand. "A thief in the night shall reap what he sows. Beware the price of stolen dreams. His laughter guards our hidden groves, where shadows cloak the forest's seams. For every stolen breath and lie, a thief must meet his painful end. The trickster's will our spirits tie, so in his grace our lives suspend." The crowd surged forward, grabbing Noah first. He screamed, his terror echoing through the trees as they pulled him towards a makeshift altar beside the bonfire. The woman chanted louder, her voice rising in a hypnotic rhythm as they began their gruesome work. They stripped him of his shirt and bound his arms to a wooden frame. I tried to move, to help him, but the grip on my shoulders tightened, pinning me to the ground. The woman approached Noah, holding a knife with a blade that gleamed in the firelight. She started to slice into his back, her movements deliberate and unhurried. Noah's screams pierced the night as she methodically carved the shape of wings into his flesh. Blood poured from the wounds, soaking the ground beneath him. The crowd's chant grew louder, almost drowning out his cries. I watched in horror as the woman reached into the incisions, breaking the ribs and pulling them outward, creating a parody of wings. Noah's agony was unbearable to witness. His screams turned to whimpers, his body convulsing in pain. The woman didn't stop until the work was complete, his lungs exposed and hanging grotesquely from his back. They lifted Noah's broken body and placed him over the fire. The smell of burning flesh filled the air, making me gag. His life ebbed away as the flames consumed him, the once vibrant light in his eyes fading to nothing. The woman turned to me, her expression devoid of mercy. "You will meet the same fate," she said. "He demands it." The smell of burning flesh and the sight of his broken body over the fire was seared into my mind. Despair settled over me as I closed my eyes. A deafening blast shattered the night. My eyes flew open to see the shaman stumbling backward, a gaping wound in her chest. She collapsed to the ground, her white eyes staring lifelessly into the void. The villagers turned in shock as another shot rang out, this time hitting one of the men holding me. I twisted free from their grasp and saw the park ranger standing at the edge of the clearing, a pump-action shotgun in his hands. He fired again, the sound echoing through the forest, before one of them tackled him to the ground. "Run," he shouted, his voice raw and desperate. "Get the hell out of here." I didn't need to be told twice. I sprinted into the darkness, the chaos of the clearing fading behind me. Branches whipped at my face, and the snow underfoot made every step a struggle. I could hear the sounds of fighting and gunshots, but I forced myself to keep moving. The cold air burned in my lungs, but adrenaline pushed me forward. I didn't stop until I reached the station, my legs threatening to give out from under me. I burst through the door and slammed it behind me. Inside, Carl lay where we had left him, his face pale and twisted in pain. I stumbled to the radio, my hands trembling as I fumbled with the controls. "Mayday! Mayday!" I yelled into the microphone. "This is an emergency. We need help. Please, someone, come quickly." Static filled the room, punctuated by my ragged breaths. I repeated the call, my voice growing more frantic with each passing second. Finally, a voice crackled through the speaker. "This is Ranger Station Bravo. What's your location?" "Over." I could barely form the words. "Olympic National Park. The ranger station near Mount Christie."
"We're under attack!"
"Please."
"Send help!"
"Copy that. Help is on the way. Stay put and stay safe." "Over." I collapsed to the floor, my body trembling with exhaustion and fear. Carl moaned softly, his eyes fluttering open. What happened? Where's Noah?" Tears streamed down my face and I found myself choked up. "He's gone. Man, help is coming." The minutes stretched into an eternity as we waited. The wind howled around the station, and every creak and groan of the structure set my nerves on edge. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that the forest itself was closing in on us. The radio crackled again, this time with a different voice. "Helicopter en route. At 15 minutes. Prepare for extraction." I glanced at Carl, his eyes filled with confusion. "Hang on, we're getting out of here." As the minutes ticked by, I couldn't help but think about the ranger. He had saved my life, but he hadn't made it back. My mind conjured up images of what might have happened to him, the cultists overwhelming him in the darkness. A sense of guilt gnawed at me, knowing he had sacrificed himself for us. The sound of rotors cut through the night, growing louder as the helicopter approached. I ran to the window and saw its searchlight piercing the treetops, scanning for the station. I helped Carl to his feet, supporting his weight as we made our way to the hatch. The helicopter hovered above, lowering a rescue basket. The wind from the rotors whipped the snow into a frenzy, but I didn't care. Salvation was finally here. We secured Carl in the basket first, and I watched as he was hoisted up, disappearing into the safety of the helicopter. My turn was next. I realized that I was now alone and exposed, fear coursing through me as I scanned around the edge of the forest, expecting to be grabbed and taken seconds before my rescue. But the moment never came. As I gripped the rope, I took one last look at the forest below. The flames of the bonfire still flickered in the distance. I was lifted into the air, the ground falling away beneath me. The helicopter's crew pulled me inside, and I collapsed onto the floor, still holding onto my pack. My body finally giving in to exhaustion. The doors closed, and the helicopter banked away, leaving the horrors of the park behind. Weeks had passed since the harrowing events, but the memories clung to me like the bitter cold. I had returned to civilization, seeking solace in the familiar chaos of the city. I found a wealthy collector through a network of contacts. The artifacts fetched a price tenfold the cost of gear. The money was substantial, but as I held the cash, it felt like a hollow victory. Noah's absence weighed heavily on me. His disappearance was chalked up as a missing persons case, and despite my best efforts to explain what had happened, no one believed me. The authorities conducted a search of the area, but they found no trace of the cult, the artifacts, or the clearing. It was as if the forest had swallowed up all the evidence. I returned to the site where we had parked the truck. The dirt bikes were gone, stolen by opportunistic thieves, but the truck remained. I drove back in silence, the road winding through the dense forest. For a moment, I thought I saw the girl watching me from atop a ridge until I realized it was just paranoia. I stepped on the gas a little harder. Back home, I checked the Tomb Raiders forum again. The post that had led us into the forest was gone, deleted without a trace. I messaged the mods, but apparently they don't keep records to maintain confidentiality. I wrote about our experience, detailing every terrifying moment, but the responses were skeptical at best. Most dismissed it as a work of fiction or a desperate cry for attention. Time passed, and I tried to return to a semblance of normalcy. Yet, the wilderness called to me stronger than ever. It was my sanctuary, the only place where I could find peace amidst the turmoil. I spent more and more time outdoors than ever before, but now it always felt like I was just running from something. Determined to prove what had happened, I returned to the forest with a camera and recording equipment. This time, I documented every step, capturing footage of the trees, the snow, and the eerie silence that hung in the air. I retraced our path, hoping to find the clearing again, but each night, as I reviewed the footage, something strange would happen. The files would be corrupted or entire segments missing. I pressed on. I found the site where Noah had fallen, the ground still bearing faint traces of what had happened. I set up the camera and began to speak, recounting the events in detail. As I spoke, a cold wind swept through the clearing, and the camera's screen flickered. I finished my account and turned to check the recording, only to find the file corrupted once again, the footage replaced by static and a faint, mocking laughter. I returned home, defeated and exhausted. My attempts to share what I had experienced were met with disbelief and ridicule. The files I managed to save were corrupted beyond recognition. It was as if the forest itself was conspiring against me. Almost exactly 1 year later, as I browsed the forums, a new post caught my eye. It was cryptic, eerily similar to the one that had led us into the nightmare. It spoke of another trove of artifacts, hidden deep within the wilderness, waiting to be claimed. The post was signed with a new name, Skigger. Different handle, same style, another trap. They had taken so much from me, left scars that would never heal. I opened my drawer, my fingers brushing over the cold metal of my weapons. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. This time, I'll be ready. The forest's secrets won't remain hidden forever. Story 2. My new neighbor has been watching me from my closet. I had hauled up the last of my belongings to my new apartment. I dropped my black trash bag full of clothes on the floor and surveyed the bare surroundings of my new home. The walls were beige with stray stains randomly dotted from God knows what, from the previous tenants that the owners didn't finish cleaning. The carpet had a coarseness that I could feel even beneath the thick soles of my shoes, and gave off the faint aroma of cigarette smoke. There was going to be a lot of work for me to make this dingy unit somewhat habitable. A day later, I was already feeling buyer's remorse for taking this place immediately. Either the property owners were trying their best to unload this dump as quick as they could, or I was desperate enough to sign off on it, thinking that it wouldn't be so bad. The feeling changed when I had a good look at my new neighbor living right next door to me. She turned to greet me, and I immediately averted my gaze downward. I certainly found her attractive, but my natural shyness took over. She stopped me, and I somehow managed to look her in her beautiful hazel eyes that almost hypnotized me. I said, "You just moved here, right?" she asked me, while I marveled at the melody in her speaking voice. Yeah. Yes, I did," I stammered, the words almost stalling in my throat. Being an introverted person, I'm not used to people randomly talking to me, on the rare moments it does happen. But when it's a beautiful person like she was, my anxiety becomes hard to manage. And yet, here she was, talking to me and even giving me a perfectly pearly white smile. Before I knew it, I extended my arm for her and "I'm Josh," slipped out, and I cursed myself in my mind. Now she had to think you're a weirdo, I thought. She grabbed my hand and shook it, the skin of her palm radiating a warmth that traveled through and up my arm. "Hi, I'm Lena," she told me. She looked back at me, and I attempted to smile back despite my embarrassment. I was suddenly glad to be on good terms with my new neighbor, but I worried about coming off as too obvious. And I told her, "Well, see you later." I timidly ended. I beat my head against the door, cursing myself. Stupid, stupid, stupid. Like a lovesick high schooler who ended any chance with the biggest crush he ever had. After that, I expected she'd never talk to me again, not even looking my way again. So, when she showed up at my door with a bag of takeout, to say I was surprised would be the biggest understatement in my lifetime. "Just wanted to surprise you with some excellent food. I spent all day making it." She winked as she said this, and I felt my face almost burn red. We got to know each other over the next couple hours, and little by little, I opened up to her, which was a first for me. I still felt a little reserved, but I could relax knowing that she didn't think I was a complete dork. I even cracked a few lame jokes, and she laughed like she was watching me perform stand-up. It seemed like it ended so quick and she left. She promised she'd see me soon, even though I was left alone in my less than stellar living space. I was glad for such great company. I went to sleep later, My bed situated right across from my closet. My closet was empty, aside from the few shirts I had hanging inside, and the door was shut. This was a superstition I had that I never quite grew out of. It was in the early morning hours when I had just randomly woken up that I heard it. I realized what it was, and my sleepy eyes had bulged out of my sockets. From across my bed, I could hear the faint but unmistakable rhythm of breathing. There was someone in my room, just across my bed. I pulled my blankets closer like it was a shield protecting me from the intruder. I didn't dare move, didn't dare to breathe, praying that whoever was here would just walk away. My alarm clock sat next to me, its soft green glow the only source of illumination in my room, and I was desperately hoping it wasn't bright enough to expose my face. The minutes ticked by slowly, while the pounding in my heart grew rapidly and harsher with every changing second. All the while, the breathing never faltered or grew louder, just the steady exchange of oxygen of someone overlooking my sleeping form. The minutes ticked by for what felt like a long eternity with no change. I was summoning enough courage to try to look in the direction of my intruder. I turned my eyes over, and my fears were confirmed. From what I could make out in the darkness, my closet door was not closed like it was, but wide open. Inside, I could make out the crouched form of a person sitting, watching me from across my room. I wanted to scream, to confront this person, but my fear kept me paralyzed and had my vocal cords in a stranglehold. All I could do was lay there as this figure stayed hunched over and breathing. I don't know how I managed to fall back asleep. I woke up to the sun's rays breaking through the window, the dawn being a welcome sight. I looked back at my closet, and it was closed, just like how I left it the previous night. I took a moment to calm down and rationalize that it was just a nightmare, maybe a case of that sleep paralysis that I heard about online. It took me a while to get myself out of bed and out for my routine. I got to work, operating on autopilot throughout the day. I finally made it home, and Lena was walking opposite of me. "How was your first night?" she inquired and looked at my sleepy, deprived face. "You look like you didn't sleep well." I wanted to tell her about the weird dream I had, and maybe get a hug from her while she tells me it's going to be all right. I just, had a rough night. First night jitters, and all. As I said this, my eyes kept darting between her and off to the side. As much as I wanted to admire her, I felt so intimidated being in her presence, and I didn't feel worthy to. "Well, I won't be out long, so let me know if you need anything." She waved delicately as he walked away. I was glad for her offer, and I tried to put the whole nightmare out of my mind completely. I was going to bed again later that night, and I made sure the closet door was shut. No way it could open from the inside. Right, there was nothing else inside either. No way this could happen again. I woke up the same time in the night, and I felt dread flood in my body as I again heard the soft breathing from my closet. My eyes darted, and this time I dared to move my whole head toward my closet, door wide open. The intruder hunched over inside. My breathing became quick and shallow as if all oxygen in my room was depleted. I stared down at whoever was in my closet as they coolly remained still. I froze like a deer watching upcoming headlights of imminent demise as I waited for this nightmare to charge at me, but it never did. They just kept sitting there, breathing softly. The reality had set in that this wasn't a nightmare, that there was a person sitting in my closet, watching me from the shadows. I watched for hours until I noticed the dawn begin to bleed into my bedroom. In that half a second, I looked away. The figure had vanished. This time, the closet door was still open, a sign that this was in fact real. I walked inside for any other indication that someone was inside during the night. There was nothing there. I was both so afraid because I had an intruder staring at me from my closet and frustrated at myself for being too afraid to do anything. I decided to do something about it, and I would catch whoever it was in the act. I had gone in search of anything that would help me, and I settled on a modest setup, but hopefully would help me out. I picked the last item I needed when I felt a hand grip my shoulder, and I had nearly jumped 10 feet in the air. "Whoa, sorry about that." Lena greeted me with her usual vibrance. "Didn't mean to scare you like that. Just trying to say hi." "Oh, that's all right. I said, trying to get my heart rate to slow down. I'm not great when people sneak up on me like that. Oh, well, that's a problem, because sneaking up on people is what I do best, she said with a sly smirk. She was devious, but I couldn't help finding it cute. She walked around with me for a while, and being in her presence made me forget about everything for a bit. I genuinely didn't want to go back to my apartment with whoever waited for me to fall asleep. I wanted to keep talking to Lena, get to know her even more, get her to like me more. Regretfully, we had to part ways, and she promised that we'd meet up again soon. Back in my room, I set up my makeshift surveillance system. A camera and a motion-activated light had to do, but it turned out to be all I needed. I had everything ready by the time I went to sleep, until I had woken moments ago. I woke up to a brightness in my eyes, and the breathing again. My camera was pointed right in view of my closet and was recording whoever was inside and had a light on them. I primed myself to finally confront the intruder, call 911, and that would be the end of it. I bolted upright, ready to defend myself, and immediately my confidence shattered and my resolve was drained when I saw who was inside. Lena had been squatting in my closet in plain view, glowering at me in a way I had never seen her do, or thought she was capable of. I would say it's Lena I'm looking at, but at the same time it's not. The way she was hunched over, her skeletal legs were elongated. Her arms were just as long and taut around her forearms and ended in 5 sharp blades of her fingernails. Her face, oh God, her face as I'm looking at it now is straight from my nightmares. Her grin looks horseshoe-shaped, it's stretched impossibly long across her face. Her eyes have a malice to them, a predator toying with its food in prolonged torture before devouring it whole. I'm watching her now as she keeps staring back at me. She's standing straight up. She's impossibly tall, the top of her head nearly touching the ceiling. She's walking towards me. Strands of drool are hanging off her teeth. Help me. Story 3. There's something in the walls. I think I was around 6 years old when I started to notice something felt unusual about our family home. My parents told me we had moved when I was a baby, so it's been the only place I recall as being home, but it never quite felt right. I would go to friends' homes after school or at weekends for birthday parties, and the atmosphere just felt so different in comparison to when I was home. There hung an air of what I would describe as oppressive malevolence in our home, but as a child it felt like fear, and I remember trying to articulate this cloying, crushing, almost sinister presence to my parents all those years ago, but it was casually disregarded as an overstimulated child's imagination. As I grew older, I felt a greater sense of unease at home and found myself staying out with friends, doing whatever I could to prolong my time away before I had to come back. The feeling of anxiety and paranoia would rise back to the surface the closer I got to home. You see, it felt like I was being watched, like there was something in the home monitoring my every action. This wasn't a, oh, my parents could walk in at any moment, teenager level of paranoia. No, this was hairs standing on end, goosebumps, fight or flight instincts kicking into overdrive, as if my body and mind were sounding the alarm to get out.
Run!
But after searching every room on several occasions, there was never anything out of place. I continued to raise my concerns with my parents, but it fell on deaf ears. They chalked it up to me, acting out as teenagers typically do. They had bigger issues, as I could see the cracks starting to show in their marriage, eventually becoming all-encompassing, as arguments ruptured around the home and their relationship began to crumble, all while the ever-present feeling of malevolence continued to hang in the air. As time went on, their relationship completely broke down. My mother had become a recluse, quit her job, and spent most days locked away in the spare room, only emerging to get food, with barely an acknowledgement to mine or my father's existence. My father had become bitter and distant, a hollow shell of his former self, except for the infrequent outbursts of emotion swaying from anger to desperate pleading whenever he and my mother crossed paths in the kitchen. The strange thing is, during this time, the house felt almost normal. The dread and paranoia I'd felt before had almost disappeared, but had been replaced by the anguish that comes with being in the middle of a family falling apart. It didn't last too long, though, as my mother stopped emerging from the spare room entirely, and the silence in the house was frequently punctuated with the thunderous knocks of my father's fists on the spare room door, followed by his pleas for my mother to come out and eat. Then the sorrowful sobbing of a broken man heading back to his room. I hated it. I hated being in the middle of it all and seeing the people I loved, my parents, my world, crumbling away, all while I wasn't even pinging on their radar. I felt invisible. In such a short space of time, my father had become completely despondent, barely registering my presence despite my protests. My mother hadn't been seen for days, and he had stopped knocking on her door. I tried knocking myself, pleading with her to come out and eat, but was met with silence each time. After several attempts across multiple days, my father screamed at me to leave her alone. 1 week had passed, and it felt like time had come to a standstill in the house. My father stopped going to work, and like my mother, had started to confine himself to his bedroom. The air felt stagnant, and the silence was almost suffocating. I spent a lot of time out of the house seeking solace in my friends and their families, too ashamed to admit what was going on at home, diverting questions over lunch to other topics of conversation. I was not prepared for the 8th day. I woke up in the middle of the night and immediately felt it. The rising dread, the pervasive feeling of being watched. My throat tightened and my pulse began to quicken as the fear grasped my mind like an iron vice. I felt like I was 6 again, unable to truly convey and comprehend the internal terror I was going through, my fight or flight instincts screaming. I tried to force the feelings back and put my pillow over my head, but my mind was racing, and the surging feeling that something sinister didn't want me to sleep was destroying any chance of me getting rest. I decided to get up and see if going outside would help clear my mind. It was only after I climbed out of bed and my eyes had adjusted to the darkness that I noticed the smell. There was a rancid, foul stench in the air, like rotting food left out in the sun to fester in the heat. I accidentally took a breath, and the smell clung in my throat, causing me to cough and retch in disgust. I grabbed a nearby shirt and put it over my mouth and nose to act like a makeshift mask, but it was of minimal effect against the invasive stench. I went into the hallway to see if I could try and figure out the source of the foul odor, and noticed the doors to both the spare room and my parents' room were open. I yelled my parents' names into the darkness, but was met with silence, so I cautiously walked down the hallway to the spare room first to see if my mother was still there, and simply was in a deep sleep. As I got closer to the room, my hair began to stand on end as the feeling of dread became more and more intense. I reached the doorway, peered into the dark, and was hit with an even more intense odor. Rotten food. No, rotten flesh. I reached for the light switch, fumbling in the darkness to find it, half choking on the smell which was seeping through my makeshift mask. I managed to find the switch, and the room was bathed in light, illuminating the true horror before me. My mother, was in the wall. Her body had become fused with the wall of the house, contorted and crumpled as if she was being slowly devoured. Her face and what remaining limbs could be seen protruding were gaunt and pale, her cheeks sunken and eyes hollow as if all moisture had been drawn from her. Her face held an expression of pure anguish, misshapen and stretched into a ghastly visage, violently screaming without the sound. Tears clouded my view as I fell back into the hallway, and a wave of nausea hit me. My mind couldn't comprehend the horror I just saw. That was my mother, who only a few days before was fine. But now, I righted myself, pushing back my unraveling thoughts, and tried to regain my composure. Whatever happened here was not natural, and the being or entity that caused it may still be present. A chill ran down my spine as the next thought slipped into my mind. Father. I turned around and walked further down the hallway to my parents' bedroom and was met with the same disgusting smell. My heart sank as I reached for the light switch. He was on the floor, but only half his body was visible, for anything below his waist was scattered in the walls. I looked up to the ceiling and saw viscera and rotten flesh poking out of cracks above. What was once a magnolia room was covered in dark red and brown stains, with scraps of flesh and shards of bone poking out of the walls. His neck was craned at an inhuman angle, forcing his head to look towards the ceiling, and like my mother, he was holding an expression of pure, contorted agony. My mind was on the brink of collapse. I turned to leave the room when I saw he had one outstretched arm, which appeared to be pointing to something on the floor. I looked over from the doorway, paralyzed with fear and unable to convince my body to move closer, but managed to make out what looked like a message scratched into the floor under his bloody fingernails. "Burn it all before it feeds." I didn't have to be told twice. Adrenaline surged through my body, shaking me free from shackles of fear and driving me into action. I rushed back out into the hallway and headed downstairs to the kitchen. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, the air felt heavy, and the feeling of being watched became ever more pervasive. My heart was racing, and I could swear I could see the walls rippling and undulating, but each time my eyes tried to focus on a particular point, all I could see was darkness. It felt like whatever this entity was, it was becoming aware of my plans, and as I reached the kitchen, my body started to slow down. I was feeling drained, both emotionally and physically, my mind crumpling under the stress and all I had seen, my body fighting back the waves of nausea and the cycles of adrenaline surging and dumping, causing my muscles to cramp. Through my addled mind, it was starting to make sense. Whatever this thing was, it influenced and fed on emotions, breaking people down enough to feed on them physically, and I was running out of energy and time. I took advantage of another wave of adrenaline and ran to a kitchen drawer, frantically fumbling in the dark until my hand clasped round a box of matches. I struck several matches, setting fire to the curtains above the kitchen sink. The flames began to slowly crawl up the curtains and spread to the nearby cabinets on the wall. A blood-curdling shriek reverberated around the house as the flames started to engulf the walls and smoke plumed across the kitchen ceiling. The walls started to pulsate violently, and I could hear the foundations creaking and feel it rumbling beneath my feet. The shriek kicked my fight and flight drive fully into flight, and I ran out the kitchen into the main hall towards the door. The walls shook more violently the closer I got to the door, and the mix of smoke and rancid, rotten flesh caught in my throat, making me almost vomit. But I managed to compose myself and reach the front door. My hand was on the handle when I heard a voice from behind me. "Where are you going, my love? It's late and your father needs you." My mind nearly faltered, but I pushed the door open and ran outside to hear a scream of anger erupt from the house. Whatever this being was, it wanted me to stay and perish with it. But I ran down the street and didn't look back. My life as I knew it was over, and I had to start again somewhere new. After all, who would believe me if I told them what happened that night? I still get nightmares about what happened several years later. I looked online at the local newspapers, and it was determined to be a horrible accident. A tragic house fire killed a family of 3 with no suspected foul play. The emergency services who attended the scene couldn't recover all the bones of the bodies, but had chalked it up to the remains being scattered and buried in the debris as the house collapsed in the fire. The reason I've wrote all this is to serve as a warning. If you ever visit somewhere and you don't feel right, like someone is watching you and your brain and body are screaming out telling you to run, listen before it's too late. Story 4. Head and Sense. After a housewarming party, a few of my friends decided to stay over and help me clean up. During it, we found a game, Head and Sense. None of us had heard of it before, so we came to the conclusion someone at the party must have left it by accident. We were all still a little drunk and a little high, so decided to sack off the rest of the cleaning and give it a play. The box looked old and homemade with no images on it. Just the name written bold on the front and a quick blurb on the back. Can you sense the head? We gathered around the box as I went to open it and shook it at one of the fellow girls that stayed to make her jump. She didn't jump, just gave me side-eye and laughed. Inside was a mannequin head in the style of a Mr. Potato Head. The eyes, nose, mouth, Ears and the brain were removable. Underneath was an instruction sheet that read as follows. Player 1 is the header. The header's role is to hide each piece of their head around the playing space. Player 2 plus are the sensors. They're to sense out the pieces and return them to the head. When all pieces are returned, the sensor who returns the final piece becomes the new header and hides with the now complete head. The original header then becomes the final sensor and has to sense out the head to complete and win the game. Make sure to follow these rules and don't cheat, or there will be consequences for all. The final rule was a bit weird, but we thought it was whoever made the game simply having a dig at cheaters. We were wrong. Because I found the game, everyone decided that I would be the header. So while everyone waited in the living room, I walked around the house, placing each piece in random hiding spots. I made sure to keep the pairs together to make it easier. That way, if we got bored, I wouldn't have to run around trying to remember where the other eye or the other ear was. I then walked back to the living room, head in hands, and told them it was ready. They all set off to find the pieces, and the game was afoot. Actually ahead. Sorry, I hate puns, but I giggled to myself writing that. Steve was the first to return, holding the mouth, and placed it in the head I was holding. We decided while waiting for the others we'd have a smoke. I put the head on our beer-soaked table and rolled a couple of joints. We sat and spoke and laughed about random shit. I placed my joint in the mannequin's mouth and asked if it liked the taste. Steve blurted out, "Don't lose your head, buddy," and we fell to the floor laughing some more. Then he went as white as a sheet and stopped laughing. I asked him if he was okay, but he didn't reply. He stared at the mannequin head. I asked again and he stammered, "Did you see that?" I asked what, and he told me he was certain the mannequin smiled. I told him to go lay down, that he was way too high and imagining things. John and Hannah were the next to return, proudly holding the nose and ears. They placed the pieces into the head, and John asked how much me and Steve had smoked, telling us that it absolutely reeked in the room. I told them I couldn't even smell it, and we only had a joint each and a cheeky one for the head. Hannah then walked over to the window and opened it to let some air in. She suddenly span round back to us so quickly I thought she was going to fall over. "Very funny," she said. We all looked in confusion at her, not knowing what she was talking about. I asked her why, and she gave me a look that meant, "Really?" She then told us that she heard one of us shout her name so loud. It was like we were right behind her, but she couldn't tell whose voice it was. I asked if she'd had a funny turn like Steve, and if she needed to lay down too. She was adamant that she heard it, but none of us had said anything to her, never mind shouting her name. Then Lee came back holding the eyes, massive smile on his face that he'd found them. He was so fucking cute. He had gorgeous eyes, the ones in his head, not his hands, and a smile that lit up every room he walked in. I swear I'm going to marry him one day. He placed them gently into the mannequin head and told us all to sit down. Collectively, we all laughed and said we're already sat down. He laughed and told us we knew what he meant, that he needed to tell us that something was weird, that the weed we'd been smoking was off, or there was something in the beer. After he picked up the eyes, the room had apparently gone dark. He saw shadows shifting around, featureless heads floating in the blackness. Told us that it was the most scared he'd ever been, and the only thing that gave him the courage to find the door was hearing us all laughing. Steve then piped up, "Only the brain left. Fuck." The brain? I forgot to hide the brain. It was still in the head. Why did it have to have an openable slot? Why couldn't it have just been a hole to place the damn thing in? I told them I forgot about the brain, and Steve made an ooh sound followed by, "You broke the rules." "Fuck the rules. Someone just hide the head so I can go find it, please," I replied. They all decided to hide it together and shout for me when ready. Those 2 minutes were the longest 2 minutes of my life. I heard a shout, put down my smoke and got up, shaking myself off like I was getting ready to run a race or something. I started to head towards where I thought they shouted from. It was only a standard-sized house. There weren't many places they could hide all together. I ran up the stairs and tripped, smashing my chin into the top step. The pain was excruciating, and I somehow managed to cut the bottom of my chin open. I shouted that I'd be back in a sec, that I needed to wash myself off. I didn't hear any replies. Come to think of it, I couldn't hear them making any noise at all. I know why now, of course, but then I didn't. As I got to the bottom of the stairs, I saw the mannequin head on the table facing me. Was everyone down here, I thought? Surely not. There was nowhere to hide that many people downstairs. I walked past into the kitchen with more important things to do, washed my face and went back into the living room. The head had gone again. Confused would be the understatement of the century. I shouted for my friends, but no reply came. I shouted again. Still nothing. So I set off again to find them. I carefully went up the stairs that time to make sure I didn't fall over again. I checked my room. Nothing. I checked the spare room. Nothing. I even opened the attic door and shouted. There was no hint to where they could be. Then I heard a giggle. One of them had let slip where they were. The airing cupboard. I didn't think it was big enough to fit so many people in, especially with a boiler in there too. With cautious optimism, I snuck over to the door, grabbed the handle and pulled it open with tremendous force, smacking the wall with it. Then I appeared. Inside the airing cupboard, sat with legs crossed, was me holding the head, an exact replica of myself, fresh chin wound included. I looked down and she looked back up at me, startled. I fell back. I didn't know what was happening. Then the other me slowly stood up, her eyes glued to mine. Steve's words echoed in my mind. You broke the rules. Whatever, walked over to me, face totally void of emotion. I tried getting up but couldn't. I tried crawling away backwards but couldn't. Then I felt her hands press on either side of my head and pull. The only reason I could tell you her point of view was because I have her memories. There are 2 copies of Head and Sense now. Want to play? Story 4. Don't let them in. Addiction took our mother slowly, rocked her through it and sung her to sleep, sunk deep into the mattress on her bed. When her back teeth fell out, she left them on the side of the bathtub. I was 7, and I kept them in a matchbox. The missing pieces of her kept safe, so she wouldn't be lost forever. So maybe one day we could put her back together. Our house fell down around us, and we tried our best to raise ourselves. The ceilings had water damage and the bottom stairs had dry rot, and in the winters the radiators would bleed rust. But it was still our house, and Annie made it a home. My sister Annie mothered me, with lopsided band-aids on bruised knees and lukewarm microwave meals. She told me ghost stories and didn't mind when I crawled into her bed later on, too scared to sleep alone. She taught me to dance, barefoot on the living room carpet, music channel on full volume on the TV, shaking our hips before they were fully grown. She always let me shower first so the water was hot, never complaining when she had to make do with cold. She brushed my hair every day before school, even when I screamed and hit her when she caught the tangles. Annie was dark-haired like her father, whoever he had been, but I was blonde. Annie was desperate to be blonde too, like Marilyn Monroe, like Mom. I think she thought it would make them closer, remind Mom less of her dad. I'd give anything for her to have her hands in my hair one more time, even if it hurt. She moved to New York when I turned 18 and never came back. I still dream about her sometimes. Keeping up with our mother was impossible, and we learnt from a young age we would always be left behind. It didn't make it any easier. When she was drinking light, she shone, would wake us up at 3 a.m. with pancakes, dripping in cherry syrup. Sometimes when the weather was right and she'd had enough being drunk alone, she would call our school up and tell them we had both come down with summer sickness, and we'd drive to the beach instead. I remember being 9 years old in the back seat of the car coming home after one of our ocean days, sucking the salt from my fingers. Annie had just dyed her hair blonde, her best friend Jane helping her bend over our kitchen sink. From behind, I couldn't tell who was mother and who was daughter, radio up and windows down, blowing the sky inside. When she was drinking heavy, she'd be out all night, hair piled up like a beauty queen, eyes glazed over and ringed with glitter and black. Sometimes she'd be gone a day or 2. She would never tell us when. One day we'd just wake up to an empty house and the fridge packed full. Post-it note on the front with a smear of Mom's lipstick in the outline of a kiss, telling us she'd be back soon. Sometimes she'd bring guys home, filling the table with beer cans and ashtrays. Smoke up to the ceiling, Mom lost in the haze. We'd sleep with pillows over our heads, trying to drown out the music they would blast until the and wake up to strangers at our kitchen table in the morning, asking us where we kept the coffee. When Mom drank too little, she fell apart. She wouldn't buy food. Refrigerator a gaping hole in the wall. She'd chain smoke, leaving cigarette burns on the wallpaper up by the stairs, like the walls were sick and decaying. She barely slept, walking around with blue half moons under her eyes, knuckles raw. She would scream at the slightest thing. I remember once when I spilled a glass of juice on the couch. She looked over at me with dead eyes and dragged me off onto the carpet, and then took every single cushion off the couch and into the backyard and set them on fire. Annie went to watch a while from the window and then sat next to me on the floor, backs pressed against the skeleton of the seats, head resting in the crater of my collarbones. When Mum drank too much was the worst. She'd laugh too loud and too long at anything and everything, until her mouth started to shake and she started crying. At the breakfast table into her cereal. Annie shut down when Mom was like this, went somewhere deep inside herself where nobody could hurt her. She'd stay up until the morning watching old black and white movies on TV, whispering the lines she knew by heart like prayers. When I was 5, I'd cry when I'd find Mom passed out cold on her bed. Sure she would never wake up, Annie would wipe my tears. Tell me she was only sleeping just like the princesses in my storybook. We'd sit on Mom's bed together and wait for her to wake up. When we were older, I was the one who would pick Mom up off the bathroom floor again and again, and Annie would put her to bed, smoothing her hair off her face and the vomit from her mouth, changing her clothes if she'd pissed herself. Watching them then, there was no doubt that Annie was the mother now. It was October, and I was 13, Annie 16. It was a Wednesday night and Mom had been gone for 2 days. She'd called us that morning from a payphone, voice slurring down the line, telling us she was having the best time with all her new friends, hoped we were doing fine. When she asked me if I was having a good birthday, I hung up on her. My birthday had been the day before. Annie had given me a pile of presents, strawberry lip glosses and glittery nail polishes. I didn't ask where she'd got the money for them. I didn't care. We'd taken the bus to the beach with Jane, eaten the birthday cake she had made for me, sand getting into the frosting. It tasted like sweetness in the sea, and I savored every bite and scrape of sugar against my teeth. We watched the sun go down, Annie snapping grainy photos on her shitty Nokia as I blew out my candles, wishing over and over that Mom wouldn't come home, that she'd just stay gone this time. But that Wednesday night, me and Annie weren't speaking. Anger hung heavy between us, seeping through the floorboards. It began when she tripped at the bottom of the stairs. We'd both laughed, Annie throwing her head back, gap between her front teeth catching the light. When I'd bent to pick her up, I'd caught her breath, warm against the freckles on my cheeks. I let go of her arms and she fell again, hitting the floor and grinning, shaking her hair from her face. Her breath was heavy with whiskey. I couldn't stop picking her up too, couldn't watch her fall again and again. Just like Mom, I knew she'd never get back up. I'd stared down at her, blonde hair fallen into her eyes, and all I could see was our mother. And then I was running, feet slamming the hallway like heartbeats turned loose. I'd run for the kitchen and tipped every bottle we had down the sink, shoving Annie back as she fought to stop me, catching liquor on her fingers as it fell. She grabbed my shoulders and made me drop the very last bottle. It smashed between us on the floor, glass shards shining like we'd dragged the stars out of the sky and broken them, pieces we could never put back. Outside, through the open windows, the sky turned pale gold, clouds a mess of pink and cream smeared across the horizon. I cried then, watching Annie on her knees picking up the pieces. That was Annie, always trying to fix things even when it was too late. The smell of food dragged me from my room, stomach turning traitor inside my ribcage. Annie was cooking pasta, real food not made in a microwave. She'd set the table, Tammy Wynette singing softly from the CD player, Annie gently swaying her hips as she stirred the tomato sauce, rich and warm. As we ate in silence, with every bite I forgave her. Mom never cooked dinner, or remembered my favorite was spaghetti ever since I was a kid, or stayed sober long enough to sit up at a table. Annie wasn't Mom. We were washing the dishes when we first heard it. A moth was crawling down the inside of the pane, and I cracked the window to let it out into the dark. From the backyard came a faint sound. I tilted my head to listen as it was coming from far off, crying. I figured it was Mika, the 2-year-old next door, having a tantrum loud enough for us to catch. Or maybe even Lucky Strike, the cat that junkies down the street, begging for food like he sometimes did. I always wanted to feed him when he came around, winding over my ankles. But Annie always stopped me, saying once you started giving, they never stopped taking. Looking back, I don't think she was talking about the cat. Annie flipped the Christmas lights strung up around the porch, and we sat on the plastic beach chairs watching the skies. When we were little, we'd sit outside and Annie would tell me the names of all the constellations and the stories of how they came to be hung up in the night sky. I had to grow up before I realized she made them all up as she went along. It was a game we still like to play now, making up ridiculous stories for the shapes we could pick out. Yes, that one there is the cause light. It got there when God dropped it out of his convertible window and never picked it up, she said, nodding sagely and hiding her smile. Of course, I said, waving my hands and pointing up past the power lines, right next to the ashtray, left there by angels on a smoke break. Yeah, they say if you wish on it, all your dreams will come true, said Annie, grinning. She stopped laughing, voice quieter, face tilted up to all those dead stars. Let's wish, Emmy. Let's wish. So we did. The sound of crying interrupted us. It was closer this time, and definitely human. We turned to each other, confused. Annie shrugged and I squinted out into the black. It sounded like a baby, lost and tired and alone. It must be Mika, I said, slowly getting to my feet. Maybe he walked around the back. Shit. Do you want to call Connie and tell her we'll bring him over? Annie didn't reply, and I sighed, rolling my eyes. Guess I'll do everything then. I stepped off the porch, grass soft against my heels. The air smelled like it might rain, fresh and clean and growing. A promise unfulfilled. Annie's voice was strained. I turned to her, smiling. It died on my face when I saw the look on her own. Get inside now. She was staring out into the dark, past me, opening the door with one hand behind her, fingers fumbling on the catch. I froze, barefoot in the dirt. I'd found what she was looking at. In the bushes by the back fence was a person, crouched with their knees tucked up neat under the chin, arms wrapped around legs, their mouth hung wide, softly opening and closing as he cried, like a child, lost in the dark. Not like a child, but as someone pretending, mimicking the sound, open and closed out in the blackness. Suddenly they straightened, snapping upright face still hidden by the black. They were tall and thin, too thin to be a normal person. Panic made me move, animal instincts left over from the days we lived up in the trees carrying me forward. I was faster than Annie, dragging her inside and slamming the door behind us, hearing it bounce on its hinges as I locked it. We watched as the person slowly walked towards the house, steps deliberate and long. Annie reached for my hand, holding me tight and turned me to face her, holding my shoulders. Don't turn around, Emmy. Don't turn around. Instinctively, I started to look over my shoulder out into the darkness. Annie grabbed my face, hard, and shook her head. I knew then she was serious. Her voice cracked, and she cleared her throat, gripping my hand tight enough to hurt, nails digging in, grounding herself. I looked down at our fingers interlocked, both of us grown from the same bones. I'm gonna call the cops and everything is going to be... Her voice faltered, stuttering, tears spilled over her lashes, dripping like the promise of rain. Annie never cried. Your phone's on the porch, she whispered, and bile crawled its way up my throat. Her phone was upstairs, charging. The soft tap-tap-tapping filled the silence. Annie turned to the window, eye whites showing her eyes were so wide. It was the sound of someone's forehead against the glass. Slowly, over and over, they started to speed up, faster and harder, skin meeting glass until they were slamming into the window hard enough to shake the panes. The tapping stopped, and I was about to ask Annie if I could look now when she screamed. followed by the sound of cracking glass and the loudest slam yet. Whoever was in our yard had just smashed their face hard enough into the window to break it. We ran upstairs, 2 at a time, skipping the ones caved in with dry rot on instinct. I turned behind me once and Annie yanked my face back before I could see. The sound of broken glass echoed behind us as we made it to the bathroom. Locking the door, a thin, wailing cry, like a baby calling for its mother, filled the hallway. Trapped between the walls and locked doors, Annie threw her back against the door, feet jammed up against the bathtub, clutching the knife she had grabbed from the kitchen. I did the same, shoulder to shoulder. Slow footsteps started on the stairs, deliberate and casual. The crying had become mocking, almost laughter, shrill bursts of sound and then giggles, high-pitched and abruptly stopping before starting again. The first door on the upstairs floor was my bedroom, and we heard the distinct sound of it slamming open. They were looking for us. "What the fuck is going on?" I asked Annie, not even bothering to brush away the tears that I couldn't stop falling. I watched my sister pick herself up off the floor and brace her hands on the door as we heard the sound of a second door slamming open. Mom's room. The next room on the hallway was the bathroom. Annie pulled me to my feet and handed me the knife. I shook my head and pushed it back to her, terrified of what would happen if I had to use it. Annie shoved me and pressed the knife into my hands, thumb pressing hard enough on the blade to bleed. I watched my sister's blood drip down her wrist, a winding red road, still pushing into my hands despite the pain. I took the knife. Something slammed against the wall that Mom's room shared with the bathroom. A high-pitched wail followed. I held my breath, could feel my heart beat in the base of my throat. A wild and frantic thing. "I'm going to get the phone from my room." I shook my head violently, about to argue. Annie clamped a hand over my mouth. I could taste the blood on her hand, salty and sweet, like birthday cake by the ocean. "Yes, I'm going to get the phone, and I'm going to call the cops, and we're going to be okay." I shook my head again. "It's the only way. When I go, I need you to lock the door, and you don't open it for anything or anyone. Not for me, not for anyone. Promise me." I shook my head, and Annie pressed her hand into my mouth, crushing my teeth against my lips so it made my eyes water. "Yes, promise me, Em." Something smashed in the room next door. Annie brushed the hair off my face, gently tucking it behind my ear. "Promise," she mouthed, and unlocked the door as slowly as possible, bolt scraping gently. I watched the curve of her shoulder disappear into the black hall outside, like the moon in eclipse. And then she was gone. I couldn't move or breathe for a second, and then I slammed the bolt shut, just as something bounced off the outside of the door. A high-pitched scream followed, handle rattling up and down hard enough to pop one of the screws. I watched it roll towards me on the tiles, and then silence. I sat with my back to the door, holding the knife and wishing I was holding Annie's hand instead. Still silence. Nothing but me and my lungs slowly filling the room with my breath. "Em," came a voice through the door. I started, hands gripping the knife. "Honey, what's going on?" "Mom." My voice cracked. "Mama, is that you?" I wrapped my arms around myself, shaking, trying to keep myself still. "Sweetie, it's okay, just open the door. It's okay, just let me in." The handle rattled again. "Gentler. Just let me in. It's all okay." She banged on the door and I took my handle of the bolt. "Honey, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I missed your birthday. I'm sorry I'm such a terrible mother. Please." Her voice broke and she started to cry. "Just let me in, baby, I'm so sorry." I screwed my eyes shut. She sounded so sad and so lost. I just wanted her to hold me like when I was a kid, and I'd come in off the swings with a scraped knee. Maybe this time she meant it. Maybe it would all be okay. My hand found its way to the bolt again. My sister's voice came through the door, warm and gentle. "Yeah, Emily let us in. It's all okay." My hand froze on the bolt and I tightened my grip on the knife. Annie never called me by my full name. A hand banged on the door, handle rattling. "Emily let us in." Annie's voice became low and guttural, followed by the same shrill giggles from before. Mom spoke now, pleading and crying, voice getting louder and louder. "Let us in, let us in, let us in." over and over again, punctuated by her fists on the door. I thought about demons and monsters, all the bedtime stories we pray don't crawl out from under the bed. That's not my sister and you're not my mother. I screamed through the door, hands over my head. I climbed into the bathtub and curled in a ball, cradling myself, knife clutched to my chest. I didn't know what it was outside that door, but I knew it wasn't Annie. It wasn't the voice that yelled at when I changed TV channel, the one that sang me happy birthday, the one that told me I was smart even when I got bad grades, the one that read me stories about princesses that never wake up. It wasn't human. Bangs and yells came from downstairs, followed by the footsteps of people running. A low, guttural howl ripped through the house, filling the room until I felt like I was drowning in the sound, and then the door was kicked in. I screamed, covering my eyes, waiting to die. Arms found me and lifted me from the tub, carrying me from the room. I looked at the outside of the door as I was carried downstairs. It was covered in long, scraping claw marks. Dragged down to the floor, pillows ripped apart covered the hallway in soft down, like it had snowed inside. I watched them drift slowly as men in uniforms checked each of the rooms that looked like they had been torn apart by something feral. Outside in our driveway were police cars and an ambulance. In the middle of it all was Annie, bathed in blue and red light as it washed over her, lit up in the dark like a neon angel, face aglow. I threw myself from the cop's shoulder and ran to her, holding us both together, broken pieces and all, standing under all those constellations we made up. Gentle screaming came from the ambulance, which rocked occasionally. Annie gently turned my head away, smiling so sadly it made my chest ache as I understood. Turns out there was no demon, no wild animal or bad men trying to break in. Just Mom, out of her mind on booze and drugs and everything in between, coming to the end of a week-long binge. Something had finally broken inside her head, and this time we couldn't put her back together no matter how hard we tried. Sometimes you fall one last time and you never get back up. Annie had seen her in the garden, blood dribbling from her mouth, track marks bulging on her forearms like unmapped roads, rail thin and desperate for one more hit, one more fix. She'd searched the kitchen for all the drink I'd thrown away, and when she hadn't found it, had come to hunt for the stash she hid in the bathroom. She hadn't wanted me, just the drugs on the other side of the door, so high she could mimic Annie's voice almost perfectly. Turns out the real monsters are the ones that eat you alive slowly, the kind that come in a bottle or a needle, or at the end of a long list of reasons why you can't get out of bed in the morning. Sometimes the monsters are the ones that raise you or love you the most, but it's up to you if you let them in. Story 5. If I fall asleep again, I'm going to die. There's nothing I can do. I'm so tired. I don't think I can keep myself up anymore. Before I fall asleep, I want to tell someone what happened. No, I need someone to know the truth. This is my last message, so please let me tell you my story. 14. It began 2 weeks ago, when my co-worker, told me that 3 days without sleep was all it took to kill a guy. I scoffed. Listen, I'm in college. I stay up practically every night throughout the week. No way someone could die from just 3 days pulling all-nighters. I'm telling you, man, there's been plenty of research. Look it up. 3 days and you lose your mind. I challenged R to a bet. Whoever breaks their sleepless streak first has to take the early shifts for a month with our least favorite team member, G. When G spoke, it was always in paragraphs, mainly consisting of the words I, me, and myself. Combine that with morning coffee and a voice like television static, and you could guarantee a headache during the 5:45 to 11 a.m. slot. 11. The first few nights were easy. Truly, just 3 days was laughable to me. Sure, I was tired and my eyes felt dry and overused as hell, but more in the daytime than at night. R and I called throughout the night to prove our sleeplessness, and I used my newfound time to finish coursework. I found I had plenty of time after to endlessly scroll on social media or play games, and time sped by me. When driving to work, the daylight forced me to wear sunglasses because of how sensitive my eyes were to the brightness. Along with that, When I blinked, it took me a few seconds to lose the blurriness and focus. However, it was all manageable, and when the third day passed, I gloated cheerfully at Are. "See? Told you so. No crazy here." He grimaced. "I don't know. I can't focus on anything, really, and I keep feeling really uncomfortable, like I'm being watched all the time. Even my clothes feel like they're suffocating me right now." I shrugged. Well, the quote "being watched over," unquote, is probably from G, who's glaring at us for spending 5 seconds too long on break. Motherfucker thinks he's a manager or something. I looked pretty tired and kept yawning throughout the day. I reminded him he could quit whenever, with a grin. To be honest, I felt pretty out of it too, but the idea that I could rub this in R's face made me giddy. Looking back, perhaps it was the deprivation making my already arsehole self even more manic. I chuckled to myself out loud, more than I'd like to admit, even when R wasn't talking to me. 9. 5 days in, I lost R. During our late-night call, my scrolling trance was broken by a violent crunch coming from his side. It was a terrible, hair-raising noise, like watermelon being crushed under a truck. I felt the color drain from my face. "R, you good?" I called out. No answer. I freaked the fuck out and called out his name louder and louder till I was screaming. I was shaking from dread, but I managed to hang up and call the police. By the time I drove over, he was gone. They didn't bother to put his body in the ambulance and softly informed me he was dead on arrival. Well, what the hell happened? A break-in? I sputtered. The police officer shook her head and looked down. She stated what would soon become their official statement. He quietly passed away in his sleep. They asked me a couple questions. I didn't know his family or other friends. I was his co-worker at XXXX. I showed them my location tracker app, which showed me at home at the time of the incident, as well as the drive over. I told him he stopped responding on call, and I was worried because I knew he lived alone. They told me they would contact me if need be, possibly after an autopsy and forensics. They also provided me with contact information for support resources. I don't even know how I managed to drive home. I sat on the curb of my driveway for a few hours. Silently, mosquitoes came to feast, but I didn't feel a thing. I remember wishing the curb would just slide me away, down the gutter, into the sewers, until I was washed away into nothing. I sat there, numb, until the sun came up. 7. I couldn't sleep for 2 days after that. Even if I wanted to, I was given leave from work and school, and I stayed alone at home, missing a couple meals. I didn't tell my family, who lived states away, about R's passing. I didn't return my friends' calls or texts. I felt like R's death was my fault, and my emotions split between anger and fear. It had to be the sleep deprivation, right? Wasn't I responsible? Why didn't I tell the police about that sound I heard that night? What was it? I could barely close my eyes, with these thoughts pounding in my head as though threatening to burst through. As irrational thoughts circled in my mind, I spiraled into despair, curling into a ball on the floor. Blinds closed. I couldn't tell day from night. My body and mind wanted me to rot away, and I listened, lying there on the cool wood floor. Some tears lubricated my aching eyes, and I let sleep take over me. 6. I woke up with a jolt to many strange sensations. All at once, damp moss under my hands, the sounds of wildlife, and the petrichor from rotting bark filled my senses. The rain was light enough it felt more like a fog misting my face. My eyes adjusted to the sparkling night sky, and I found myself in a forest that I was a stranger to. Before I had time to think, a thunderous thump reverberated through the ground. It was heavy enough for some branches to fall from the trees. Then, another one, closer. I scrambled to pull myself up, and was nearly flung back to the ground by another thud. Closer, I gasped, and ran to the side, hoping to get out of the way of whatever that thing was. I hugged the trunk of a tree, stabilizing myself as I tried to discern the direction of the monstrous movements. Suddenly, They stopped. I held my breath, as though that would keep me safe. Gripping the tree for life, I desperately tried to make out anything in the sky above. Only then did it dawn on me that I couldn't see the stars anymore. Before I had time to react, the trees surrounding me crushed into my body. I screamed and felt myself lifting up into the air, in a fistful of terrain grabbed by the monstrous being. My legs were caught between two tree trunks, and I felt them crunch along with the branches. It hadn't nabbed me quite in the center of its grip, so my arms and torso were dangling to the side in the air as it pulled me up. Desperate to wiggle myself free, I yelled in pain as I pulled and dragged the rest of my body away from my mangled legs, and I finally began to tilt and fall back towards the ground. I began gaining speed as I dropped, hurtling towards the ground below me when... 5. I woke up in a cold sweat on my floor. What the fuck was that? It felt so fucking real. I could still remember my legs stretching and tearing off as I pulled myself away from that thing. I wiped the sweat off my forehead and got up. Well, I tried to get up. To my horror, my legs didn't respond. They looked fine, but as I massaged them with my hands, I couldn't feel a thing, as my mind desperately commanded them to move. They didn't even twitch. It felt like I was trying to move rocks with my mind, and fear filled me as I began to think I'd forgotten the magic command my brain would usually say to move my legs. I prayed it was sleep paralysis, but the hands on the clock kept moving while my legs did not. It took me a bit to get over my panic, but eventually I dragged myself over to my kitchen, my growling stomach still sending signals to my brain. For once, I was glad my on-campus housing was a small, one-floor place. I drank some bottled water from the pack I left under the kitchen island and hoisted myself up slowly, using the chairs. For once, I was also glad that the chairs were bolted down. I ate some bananas from the fruit bowl. Once seated, I moved my legs to a visually comfortable position, seeing them twist and catch on each other as the tops of my feet dragged across the floor had frightened me. One who had lived so long expecting them to carry me forward forever. I had my phone in my pocket and pulled it out. How long was I out? I was shocked to see I had been sleeping for a whole day. I contemplated calling the police for help, but I was afraid because I wasn't completely honest about what happened to Are. Unreasonable, I know, but my heart wouldn't stop pounding when I tried to dial those 3 numbers. I decided to call my family. I told them I was struggling here and that I had gotten a leg injury that made it difficult to move. They told me they'd take a day off and book a flight over when they could, and I thanked them and hung up. I wish I had told them that I loved them and not to miss me too much. Now, I'm glad they won't be here in time. Exhausted from hauling myself up to the countertop and shrunken stomach content with the meal, I closed my eyes as the oversleep drowsiness lulled me to sleep again. 4. Sharp, overwhelming pain coursed through my body, along with adrenaline and shock. In moments, I knew where I was. Same forest, same night sky, same trees crushing my legs. I was still in its grip, legs mostly attached to my body. Unlike last time, I yanked myself apart and dragged my body away early enough to have a survivable fall to the ground below. I could hear the trees continuing to crack and splinter in its grip as it brought it up high, perhaps inspecting it, now that I knew it could see in the dark. And also due to my low mobility and depleting strength, I rolled into a small recess in the ground and covered myself as best I could with soil, moss, and dead leaves. As I lay deathly still and quiet, a shrill screech echoed through the air, blowing back the trees. Thuds shook the ground, so close that I was bouncing up and down. I sobbed in fear, stifling my mouth with my fist, leaving deep indents on my finger. A step flattened the trees and foliage to my side, about 3 feet away from my body. I squeezed my eyes shut. Please, please, please. I prayed for the first time. I begged for safety, feeling my consciousness flutter as I felt the pool of my blood deepen. When I opened my eyes, I saw a figure in the darkness, sitting down with his back on a tree across from my hiding place. My blood ran cold and I didn't feel pain anymore for a moment. It was Are, not in life, but in death. His skull and body were crushed to a gut-drenched, bloody mess, yet he was looking at me. I could tell. He opened the undistinguishable mash that used to be his mouth and said, "It's found you." The giant being grabbed me in its hands. This time dead on. It pulled off an arm in a slow, delicate twist and tossed it into its mouth. Then the other. Finally, its pearly teeth glinted in the moonlight for a moment before I was engulfed. I was screaming for help from from anyone when I woke up. 3. I called the police using Siri. They brought me to the hospital, where doctors had no clue what to do with me. There was no problem evident, no blood clot, nerve or spinal injury, or stroke. They decided to keep me under watch for a few days, monitoring my condition. I told them not to notify my family. I requested a DNR order. At night, when the nurses left my hospital bed, I had time to think by myself. The last dream brought me back in time before my leg injury. Could there be a chance to escape this time? But I knew there wasn't. I had been losing too much blood in the dream world, and would only prolong my life perhaps by minutes or seconds. I was terrified to fall asleep, so afraid of death to the creature in my dreams, of seeing Are again. I begged doctors not to use any sedatives or anesthesia. I pretended to sleep at night when nurses came in to check on me. I kept up my facade for 2 sleepless nights, but I was yawning uncontrollably and often, and it took from a couple seconds to a minute for my eyes to be able to focus. My dark circles became evident, and the nurses looked ever more concerned for my health. However, soon enough, the doctors lost interest in determining a diagnosis as new patients flooded in. By the 3rd day, only one nurse looked after me. In the evening, I talked with the nurse after dinner. I learned that she goes to my college, and she was here for her clinicals as a part of the nursing program. I cried, telling her I never thought I'd miss school. So many things I'd taken for granted. She looked at me sadly and asked, "What about sleeping? Don't you miss that?" I shook my head. "I can't. I get nightmares." She reassured me, "Hey, this time will be different. I promise." The hair stood on the back of my neck as fear crept into my mind. "What do you mean?" "I gave you a little melatonin. It'll knock you right into deep sleep and help you relax. Don't worry." She smiled. My face went white, but I held onto a shaky smile. "Hey, thanks. Before you head out, would you mind grabbing my phone for me?" So here I am. I can feel the sleep coming. I'm using speech to text, but I hope you all have been able to understand me. I just needed a place to put my story. I don't know who else will believe it. To my family, I'm sorry for not telling you everything. I love you, Mom and Dad. I'm so sorry for dragging you into my stupid bet. I should have listened. It's all my fault. I'll see. You... Story 6. Don't let them in. Addiction took our mother slowly, rocked her through it and sung her to sleep, sunk deep into the mattress on her bed. When her back teeth fell out, she left them on the side of the bathtub. I was 7, and I kept them in a matchbox, the missing pieces of her kept safe, so she wouldn't be lost forever. So maybe one day we could put her back together. Our house fell down around us, and we tried our best to raise ourselves. The ceilings had water damage and the bottom stairs had dry rot, and in the winters the radiators would bleed rust. But it was still our house, and Annie made it a home. My sister Annie mothered me, with lopsided band-aids on bruised knees and lukewarm microwave meals. She told me ghost stories and didn't mind when I crawled into her bed later on, too scared to sleep alone. She taught me to dance, barefoot on the living room carpet, music channel on full volume on the TV, shaking our hips before they were fully grown. She always let me shower first so the water was hot, never complaining when she had to make do with cold. She brushed my hair every day before school, even when I screamed and hit her when she caught the tangles. Annie was dark-haired like her father, whoever he had been, but I was blonde, Annie was desperate to be blonde too. Like Marilyn Monroe, like Mom. I think she thought it would make them closer, remind Mom less of her dad. I'd give anything for her to have her hands in my hair one more time, even if it hurt. She moved to New York when I turned 18 and never came back. I still dream about her sometimes. Keeping up with our mother was impossible, and we learnt from a young age we would always be left behind. It didn't make it any easier. When she was drinking light, she shone, would wake us up at 3 a.m. with pancakes, dripping in cherry syrup. Sometimes when the weather was right and she'd had enough being drunk alone, she would call our school up and tell them we had both come down with summer sickness and we'd drive to the beach instead. I remember being 9 years old in the back seat of the car coming home after one of our ocean days, sucking the salt from my fingers. Annie had just dyed her hair blonde, her best friend Jane helping her bend over our kitchen sink. From behind, I couldn't tell who was mother and who was daughter, radio up and windows down blowing the sky inside. When she was drinking heavy, she'd be out all night, hair piled up like a beauty queen, eyes glazed over and ringed with glitter and black. Sometimes she'd be gone a day or two. She would never tell us when. One day we'd just wake up to an empty house and the fridge packed full. Post-it note on the front with a smear of Mom's lipstick in the outline of a kiss, telling us she'd be back soon. Sometimes she'd bring guys home, filling the table with beer cans and ashtrays. Smoke up to the ceiling, Mom lost in the haze. We'd sleep with pillows over our heads, trying to drown out the music they would blast until the and wake up to strangers at our kitchen table in the morning, asking us where we kept the coffee. When Mom drank too little, she fell apart. She wouldn't buy food. Refrigerator a gaping hole in the wall. She'd chain smoke, leaving cigarette burns on the wallpaper up by the stairs, like the walls were sick and decaying. She barely slept, walking around with blue half-moons under her eyes, knuckles raw. She would scream at the slightest thing. I remember once when I spilled a glass of juice on the couch. She looked over at me with dead eyes and dragged me off onto the carpet and then took every single cushion off the couch and into the backyard and set them on fire. Annie went to watch a while from the window and then sat next to me on the floor, backs pressed against the skeleton of the seats, head resting in the crater of my collarbones. When Mom drank too much was the worst. She'd laugh too loud and too long at anything and everything, until her mouth started to shake and she started crying. At the breakfast table into her cereal. Annie shut down when Mom was like this, went somewhere deep inside herself where nobody could hurt her. She'd stay up until the morning watching old black and white movies on TV, whispering the lines she knew by heart like prayers. When I was 5, I'd cry when I'd find Mom passed out cold on her bed. Sure she would never wake up, Annie would wipe my tears, tell me she was only sleeping just like the princesses in my storybook. We'd sit on Mom's bed together and wait for her to wake up. When we were older, I was the one who would pick Mom up off the bathroom floor again and again, and Annie would put her to bed, smoothing her hair off her face and the vomit from her mouth, changing her clothes if she'd pissed herself. Watching them then, there was no doubt that Annie was the mother now. It was October, and I was 13, Annie 16. It was a Wednesday night and Mom had been gone for 2 days. She'd called us that morning from a payphone, voice slurring down the line, telling us she was having the best time with all her new friends, hoped we were doing fine. When she asked me if I was having a good birthday, I hung up on her. My birthday had been the day before. Annie had given me a pile of presents, strawberry lip glosses and glittery nail polishes. I didn't ask where she'd got the money for them. I didn't care. We'd taken the bus to the beach with Jane, eaten the birthday cake she had made for me, sand getting into the frosting. It tasted like sweetness in the sea, and I savored every bite and scrape of sugar against my teeth. We watched the sun go down, Annie snapping grainy photos on her shitty Nokia as I blew out my candles, wishing over and over that Mom wouldn't come home, that she'd just stay gone this time. But that Wednesday night, me and Annie weren't speaking. Anger hung heavy between us, seeping through the floorboards. It began when she tripped at the bottom of the stairs. We'd both laughed, Annie throwing her head back, gap between her front teeth catching the light. When I'd bent to pick her up, I'd caught her breath, warm against the freckles on my cheeks. I let go of her arms and she fell again, hitting the floor and grinning, shaking her hair from her face. Her breath was heavy with whiskey. I couldn't stop picking her up too. Couldn't watch her fall again and again. Just like Mom, I knew she'd never get back up. I'd stared down at her, blonde hair fallen into her eyes, and all I could see was our mother. And then I was running, feet slamming the hallway like heartbeats turned loose. I'd run for the kitchen and tipped every bottle we had down the sink, shoving Annie back as she fought to stop me, catching liquor on her fingers as it fell. She grabbed my shoulders and made me drop the very last bottle. It smashed between us on the floor, glass shards shining like we'd dragged the stars out of the sky and broken them, pieces we could never put back. Outside, through the open windows, the sky turned pale gold. Clouds a mess of pink and cream smeared across the horizon. I cried then, watching Annie on her knees picking up the pieces. That was Annie, always trying to fix things even when it was too late. The smell of food dragged me from my room, stomach turning traitor inside my ribcage. Annie was cooking pasta, real food not made in a microwave. She'd set the table, Tammy Wynette singing softly from the CD player, Annie gently swaying her hips as she stirred the tomato sauce, rich and warm. As we ate in silence, with every bite I forgave her. Mom never cooked dinner, or remembered my favorite was spaghetti ever since I was a kid, or stayed sober long enough to sit up at a table. Annie wasn't Mom. We were washing the dishes when we first heard it. A moth was crawling down the inside of the pane, and I cracked the window to let it out into the dark. From the backyard came a faint sound. I tilted my head to listen as it was coming from far off, crying. I figured it was Mika, the 2-year-old next door, having a tantrum loud enough for us to catch. Or maybe even Lucky Strike, the cat that junkies down the street, begging for food like he sometimes did. I always wanted to feed him when he came around, winding over my ankles. But Annie always stopped me, saying once you started giving, they never stopped taking. Looking back, I don't think she was talking about the cat. Annie flipped the Christmas lights strung up around the porch, and we sat on the plastic beach chairs watching the skies. When we were little, we'd sit outside and Annie would tell me the names of all the constellations and the stories of how they came to be hung up in the night sky. I had to grow up before I realized she made them all up as she went along. It was a game we still like to play now, making up ridiculous stories for the shapes we could pick out. Yes, that one there is the Coors Light. It got there when God dropped it out of his convertible window and never picked it up, she said, nodding sagely and hiding her smile. Of course, I said, waving my hands and pointing up past the power lines, right next to the ashtray, left there by angels on a smoke break. Yeah, they say if you wish on it, all your dreams will come true, said Annie, grinning. She stopped laughing, voice quieter, face tilted up to all those dead stars. Let's wish, Emmy. Let's wish, so we did. The sound of crying interrupted us. It was closer this time, and definitely human. We turned to each other, confused. Annie shrugged and I squinted out into the black. It sounded like a baby, lost and tired and alone. It must be Mika, I said, slowly getting to my feet. Maybe he walked around the back. Shit. Do you want to call Connie and tell her we'll bring him over? Annie didn't reply, and I sighed, rolling my eyes. Guess I'll do everything then. I stepped off the porch, grass soft against my heels. The air smelled like it might rain, fresh and clean and growing, a promise unfulfilled. Annie's voice was strained. I turned to her, smiling. It died on my face when I saw the look on her own. Get inside now. She was staring out into the dark, past me, opening the door with one hand behind her, fingers fumbling on the catch. I froze, barefoot in the dirt. I'd found what she was looking at. In the bushes by the back fence was a person, crouched with their knees tucked up neat under the chin, arms wrapped around legs, their mouth hung wide, softly opening and closing as he cried, like a child, lost in the dark. Not like a child, but as someone pretending, mimicking the sound, open and closed out in the blackness. Suddenly they straightened, snapping upright face still hidden by the black. They were tall and thin, too thin to be a normal person. Panic made me move. Animal instincts left over from the days we lived up in the trees carrying me forward. I was faster than Annie, dragging her inside and slamming the door behind us. Hearing it bounce on its hinges as I locked it, we watched as the person slowly walked towards the house. Steps deliberate and long. Annie reached for my hand, holding me tight, and turned me to face her, holding my shoulders. "Don't turn around, Emmy. Don't turn around." Instinctively, I started to look over my shoulder out into the darkness. Annie grabbed my face, hard, and shook her head. I knew then she was serious. Her voice cracked, and she cleared her throat, gripping my hand tight enough to hurt, nails digging in, grounding herself. I looked down at our fingers interlocked, both of us grown from the same bones. "I'm going to call the cops and everything is going to be..." Her voice faltered. Stuttering, tears spilled over her lashes, dripping like the promise of rain. Annie never cried. "Your phone's on the porch," she whispered, and bile crawled its way up my throat. Her phone was upstairs, charging. The soft tap-tap-tapping filled the silence. Annie turned to the window, eye whites showing her eyes were so wide. It was the sound of someone's forehead against the glass. Slowly, over and over, they started to speed up, faster and harder. Skin meeting glass until they were slamming into the window hard enough to shake the panes. The tapping stopped, and I was about to ask Annie if I could look now when she screamed, followed by the sound of cracking glass and the loudest slam yet. Whoever was in our yard had just smashed their face hard enough into the window to break it. We ran upstairs, two at a time, skipping the ones caved in with dry rot on instinct. I turned behind me once and Annie yanked my face back before I could see. The sound of broken glass echoed behind us as we made it to the bathroom. Locking the door, a thin, wailing cry, like a baby calling for its mother, filled the hallway. Trapped between the walls and locked doors, Annie threw her back against the door, feet jammed up against the bathtub, clutching the knife she had grabbed from the kitchen. I did the same, shoulder to shoulder. Slow footsteps started on the stairs, deliberate and casual. The crying had become mocking, almost laughter, shrill bursts of sound and then giggles, high-pitched and abruptly stopping before starting again. The first door on the upstairs floor was my bedroom, and we heard the distinct sound of it slamming open. They were looking for us. "What the fuck is going on?" I asked Annie, not even bothering to brush away the tears that I couldn't stop falling. I watched my sister pick herself up off the floor and brace her hands on the door as we heard the sound of a second door slamming open. Mom's room. The next room on the hallway was the bathroom. Annie pulled me to my feet and handed me the knife. I shook my head and pushed it back to her, terrified of what would happen if I had to use it. Annie shoved me and pressed the knife into my hands, thumb pressing hard enough on the blade to bleed. I watched my sister's blood drip down her wrist, a winding red road, still pushing into my hands despite the pain. I took the knife. Something slammed against the wall that Mom's room shared with the bathroom. A high-pitched wail followed. I held my breath, could feel my heart beat in the base of my throat, a wild and frantic thing. "I'm going to get the phone from my room." I shook my head violently, about to argue. Annie clamped a hand over my mouth. I could taste the blood on her hand, salty and sweet, like birthday cake by the ocean. "Yes, I'm going to get the phone, and I'm going to call the cops, and we're going to be okay." I shook my head again. "It's the only way. When I go, I need you to lock the door, and you don't open it for anything or anyone. Not for me, not for anyone. Promise me." I shook my head, and Annie pressed her hand into my mouth, crushing my teeth against my lips so it made my eyes water. "Yes, promise me, Em." Something smashed in the room next door. Annie brushed the hair off my face, gently tucking it behind my ear. "Promise," she mouthed, and unlocked the door as slowly as possible. Bolt scraping gently, I watched the curve of her shoulder disappear into the black hall outside, like the moon in eclipse. And then she was gone. I couldn't move or breathe for a second, and then I slammed the bolt shut, just as something bounced off the outside of the door. A high-pitched scream followed, handle rattling up and down hard enough to pop one of the screws. I watched it roll towards me on the tiles, and then silence. I sat with my back to the door, holding the knife and wishing I was holding Annie's hand instead. Still silence. Nothing but me and my lungs slowly filling the room with my breath. "Em," came a voice through the door. I started, hands gripping the knife. "Honey, what's going on?" "Mom?" My voice cracked. "Mama, is that you?" I wrapped my arms around myself, shaking, trying to keep myself still. "Sweetie, it's okay, just open the door. It's okay, just let me in." The handle rattled again. "Gentler. Just let me in. It's all okay." She banged on the door and I took my handle of the bolt. "Honey, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I missed your birthday. I'm sorry I'm such a terrible mother. Please." Her voice broke and she started to cry. "Just let me in, baby, I'm so sorry." I screwed my eyes shut. She sounded so sad and so lost. I just wanted her to hold me like when I was a kid, and I'd come in off the swings with a scraped knee. Maybe this time she meant it. Maybe it would all be okay. My hand found its way to the bolt again. My sister's voice came through the door, warm and gentle. "Yeah, Emily, let us in. It's all okay." My hand froze on the bolt and I tightened my grip on the knife. Annie never called me by my full name. A hand banged on the door, handle rattling. "Emily, let us in." Annie's voice became low and guttural, followed by the same shrill giggles from before. Mom spoke now, pleading and crying, voice getting louder and louder. "Let us in, let us in, let us in." Over and over again, punctuated by her fists on the door. I thought about demons and monsters, all the bedtime stories we pray don't crawl out from under the bed. That's not my sister and you're not my mother. I screamed through the door, hands over my head. I climbed into the bathtub and curled in a ball, cradling myself, knife clutched to my chest. I didn't know what it was outside that door, but I knew it wasn't Annie. It wasn't the voice that yelled at when I changed TV channel, the one that sang me happy birthday, the one that told me I was smart even when I got bad grades, the one that read me stories about princesses that never wake up. It wasn't human. Bangs and yells came from downstairs, followed by the footsteps of people running. A low, guttural howl ripped through the house, filling the room until I felt like I was drowning in the sound, and then the door was kicked in. I screamed, covering my eyes, waiting to die. Arms found me and lifted me from the tub, carrying me from the room. I looked at the outside of the door as I was carried downstairs. It was covered in long, scraping claw marks. Dragged down to the floor, pillows ripped apart covered the hallway in soft down, like it had snowed inside. I watched them drift slowly as men in uniforms checked each of the rooms that looked like they had been torn apart by something feral. Outside in our driveway were police cars and an ambulance. In the middle of it all was Annie, bathed in blue and red light as it washed over her, lit up in the dark like a neon angel, face aglow. I threw myself from the cop's shoulder and ran to her, holding us both together, broken pieces and all, standing under all those constellations we made up. Gentle screaming came from the ambulance, which rocked occasionally. Annie gently turned my head away, smiling so sadly it made my chest ache as I understood. Turns out there was no demon, no wild animal or bad men trying to break in. Just Mom, out of her mind on booze and drugs and everything in between, coming to the end of a week-long binge. Something had finally broken inside her head, and this time we couldn't put her back together no matter how hard we tried. Sometimes you fall one last time and you never get back up. Annie had seen her in the garden, blood dribbling from her mouth, track marks bulging on her forearms like unmapped roads, rail thin and desperate for one more hit, one more fix. She'd searched the kitchen for all the drink I'd thrown away, and when she hadn't found it, had come to hunt for the stash she hid in the bathroom. She hadn't wanted me, just the drugs on the other side of the door, so high she could mimic Annie's voice almost perfectly. Turns out the real monsters are the ones that eat you alive slowly, the kind that come in a bottle or a needle, or at the end of a long list of reasons why you can't get out of bed in the morning. Sometimes the monsters are the ones that raise you or love you the most, but it's up to you if you let them in. Story 4. The Night Ripper. This city needs the Night Ripper. People love spreading their propaganda, saying he's terrorizing New York and killing innocent females. Lies! The Night Ripper is cleansing the streets of its filth. Our city is plagued by drugs, prostitution, and homosexuality. We need a savior who can bring New York back to its glory. The Night Ripper deserves a badge of honor for all that he has done. The Night Ripper is our hero, and we, the crazed ramblings of the radio talk show host, were cut short by the turn of a dial. Rachel could not stand that nut job, and she couldn't understand how anyone could give him a platform. Did anyone deserve to die just for living differently from others? Rachel sighed to herself as she finished cleaning the last of the dirty dishes in Hunter's diner. She had a terrible late shift filled with drunk customers who kept her busy cleaning up their messes. She hated coming to this awful job every day, but she had bills to pay. She wiped the sweat from her forehead and gazed out the windows of the diner. It was practically pitch black out there, with barely any lights to illuminate the city. As she changed out of her work clothes and prepared to leave, she noticed her co-worker Tim standing by the door. "Are you really about to walk home on a night like this? The Night Ripper killed 3 women just this week alone. You're as good as dead if he sees you." Standing at a little over 6 feet, Tim resembled a bodyguard blocking the door with his folded arms and serious expression. "Oh, please. That psycho only goes after hookers, and I don't exactly match that description. This girl can handle herself just fine. Thank you very much. I don't live far, so there's nothing to worry about. See you after the weekend." Rachel gave Tim a faint smile before slipping past him and went out the door. "Can't you get your boyfriend to drive you home?" he shouted after her. "We broke up because he bored me, so I'm all on my own." Maybe the Night Ripper should go after mediocre boyfriends instead. She waved goodbye to her co-worker before venturing off into the night. Cold night air brushed against her rosy cheeks, making her wish she had dressed more appropriately for the late autumn weather. She pulled out her mini mirror and examined her outfit. It was a simple yellow sweater with faded blue jeans and Converse shoes. No way was she going to be confused for a hooker. She looked at her surroundings during her walk home, and never before had the quietness seemed so loud. The idea of a quiet New York City was an alien concept to her. Rachel figured all the news of a serial killer must have sent everyone hiding in their homes. Rachel wanted to be in her safe little apartment too, but she had business to take care of. Working at a diner in the sleazy part of the city didn't do much to pay the bills. Rachel needed a second gig to make ends meet, and it was one she wanted to free herself of as soon as she got the chance. Her second source of income came in the form of ravaging crack houses to scoop up as much drug residue as she could. It was a shameful hustle of hers, but it was the best way for Rachel to make quick cash. She collected the powder thrown about in the room and gathered it in her plastic bag. Rachel sold her findings to the local addicts and even to a few prostitutes if they crossed paths. She hated masquerading as a drug dealer at night, but she only needed a few more payments until her debt was settled. Rachel couldn't wait until the day she could put all of this behind her. She was on her way to leaving the den when she heard the agonizing, slow creak of a door being opened from downstairs. Her heart nearly exploded from her body as her mind raced through several possibilities. A cop who's trying to catch her in a drug bust? Another dealer taking out the competition? Or was it someone even worse? Rachel bolted it out of there. The creaky floorboards ruined any chance she had of being stealthy, so thought it best to leave while she still had the chance. Rachel navigated through the twisting corridors of the den until she escaped to the outside patio that connected to another house using a long board of wood. She paused. It was an extremely narrow space to move across, and the fall down would end everything. Damn it! I don't have time to think things over. I have to get out of here before he catches up with me, she thought to herself. Willing her nerves, she carefully placed one foot in front of the other on the slender plank of wood. Both arms were stretched to the side to maintain her scant amount of balance. She felt herself wobble on one side and then to the other before her leather purse slipped off her arm and down to the ground below.
Shit! My keys were in there!
Rachel cursed to herself while praying she too didn't plummet to the ground. Each step forward felt like an eternity, anxiety pooling inside her like a bomb ready to explode. She carefully scurried across the wooden plank until she reached the other side. As soon as her feet touched the rooftop, Rachel took off running down a flight of stairs and was faced with another confusing corridor of twisting angles. Who the hell designed the place? She thought as she struggled to navigate her way around. This building was even worse than the previous one. The apartment didn't look too big from the outside, but inside it was practically a labyrinth. Each corner led to several halls to traverse, and she even found herself walking in circles. Her heartbeat pounded in her chest with every second she spent wasted in the corridors. She felt so relieved when she finally found the staircase. Rachel nearly tripped over herself as she shot her legs down the spiraling set of stairs. Once she reached the first floor, she headed straight for the door and stopped right in her tracks when she saw the Night Ripper waiting for her. There he was. She saw his signature black trench coat and a bright yellow duck mask with a knife in hand. Her blood ran cold, and every ounce of energy she had left in her vanished. It was her worst nightmare come to life. Rachel's screams echoed throughout the entirety of the crack den. She did a complete 180 and took off bolting down the hall. Her frantic thoughts were muffled by the sounds of the feet slamming against the ground and her heart on the verge of bursting. Rachel could hear the Night Ripper hot on her trail. His iconic duck laugh cackled in her ears. Rachel found herself in the absolute worst place to be hunted down. The various twisting corners and halls made the crack den resemble a maze. It was like every component of the building served to slow Rachel down further. She let out a sigh of relief once she reached the fire escape. She almost tumbled down the metallic flight of stairs with how anxious she was. Her shoes stomped on the cracked concrete as she ran through the vacant neighborhood. Before, Rachel enjoyed how quiet the neighborhood became due to the Night Ripper's crimes. It lowered the chances of her being caught occupying crack dens. Now, she was desperately clinging onto the hope that someone, anyone, could save her. It was after 5 blocks of running did she meet another human. The woman wore a tight-fitting dress that went well above her knees and shabby-looking high heels. She waited on the street corner with a cigarette in hand, like she was waiting for a client. "You have to get out of here. The Night Ripper is on the loose and he'll chop us up if we don't hurry," Rachel cried in a desperate attempt to at least do one good deed that night. Perhaps if she managed to save the life of a stranger, it would make up for all the crime she had done. The woman simply rolled her eyes and blew a puff of smoke in Rachel's direction. "Fuck off. I'm not going to let you steal my clients with some stupid made-up story. I have bills to pay, so I ain't budging. I'm not in that line of business. Lady, the Night Ripper is really out there, and I just barely managed to escape from him. We have to run out of here now." I said, "Fuck off. This business is all I have, and I ain't going to let some crazed bitch take that away from me." The woman went back to puffing her cigarette. Rachel had no time to argue with the fool. She tried in vain to save her, but some people dug their own graves. Rachel bolted down several more blocks until she came across a payphone. She had just enough money to make one phone call. She contemplated between calling 911 or her roommate. Who knows how long it'll take for the police to get here? My best bet is to get my room unlocked, Rachel thought to herself as she inserted 2 nickels. She heard the low groan of her tired roommate from the other side of the phone. "Hey, it's me, Rachel. Do me a huge favor and keep the door unlocked. I lost my keys and I should be coming home soon. Please just hurry." The words fumbled in her mouth with how quickly she forced them out. It wasn't until she heard her roommate's confused confirmation did she hang up the phone and went back to running. Along the way, she heard the blood-curdling scream of a woman in her last moments. Rachel could only imagine it was the woman she tried to save earlier. Tears welled in her eyes as she imagined how close she was to facing the same fate. Her adrenaline and anxiety kept her going. Rachel dashed out of the slums with all the energy she had left. Words couldn't describe her relief once she finally arrived at her apartment. She flung the door open and locked it behind her before sitting down on the couch. She was free. Everything else was behind her now. Rachel was beyond exhausted from the blocks of running and mental anguish she went through. All the energy she had left her body as she closed her eyes to drift off into a peaceful slumber. into a peaceful dream where she was unable to hear the front door slowly turning open, unable to hear that duck laugh quickly approaching her. Story 7. I don't know who returned from space, but they aren't the NASA astronauts we sent. You may think you know this space agency, but you don't. NASA is not the sum of its publicly presented parts. I'm not simply talking about classified research and development. I'm talking about the dozens of space programs veiled from prying eyes. Programs hidden even from many folk within the company. And when I was finally offered the privilege of peering behind the curtain, I found myself at the eye of an unprecedented storm, a disaster beyond the bounds of earthly horror. The GE-1 mission. Since the climax of the space race, a consensus has grown, a prevailing belief that NASA has abandoned the final frontier. It is, however, an absurd notion that the brightest minds of this agency no longer care about space's mysteries. The truth is that our best scientists decided, decades ago, to shield humanity from the hellish things we uncovered, things lying in the pits of space that no light reaches. NASA projects featured in the media have low stakes. Even the International Space Station sits at the foot of this organization's priorities. Significant expeditions are classified, the ones intended to catapult humanity towards the stars. For instance, the ones using spacecraft beyond what the average person deems possible with human technology. We are capable of things that would leave you awestruck. We are capable of things that would leave you cold. The GE-1 spacecraft launched on Wednesday, 25th of January, 23. It sailed beyond our solar system, pursuing a slow signal that was coursing through the outer reaches of the Milky Way. Not an intelligible transmission, but a frequency that intrigued us. Nonetheless, a frequency named 784A. Hysteria swept the company on the date of the signal's first interception, Saturday, 29th October, 2022. Given 784A's ever-moving source, the frequency sparked feverish intrigue. Regarding the nature of the mysterious, moving signal, there seemed to be a different hypothesis from every NASA employee with clearance. It was, truly, an exhilarating time, and things reached a fever pitch when the GE-1 craft launched a few months later. Employees weren't eating or sleeping. They spent their waking hours sharing ideas about the mysterious transmission from space. A circuit board of explanations that finally overloaded on Thursday, the 2nd February, 23, the day on which the GE-1 stopped responding to NASA. 1 week later, on Thursday, 9th February, the signal from the spacecraft returned. Commander Irwin, this is Mission Control. Dr. Parker, the head of the project, announced, Mission Control to GE-1. Do you copy? Roger. Mission Control, Commander Tim Irwin responded. We've been trying to reach you. We lost contact with GE-1 7 days ago. Commander, what happened? What is your status? Dr. Parker asked. All systems are fine. Mission Control, Irwin replied. Dr. Parker seemed flustered by the commander's nonchalant demeanor. The project leader clawed at his gray, thinning hair with tense fingers. The old man seemed to be carefully considering his next utterance. 7 days without contact. Commander, 7. GE-1 disappeared at our end. Do you have a status report? Anything which might explain why we were unable to communicate with one another? Parker asked. Nothing. Mission Control, Irwin blankly replied. As for 784, we reached the transmission point of the signal. There was nothing to be found. We have collected as much data as possible, requesting clearance to return home. There were several minutes of nervous mumbling from various scientists and board members. Dr. Parker looked broken beyond measure by the time he leaned forwards, heavy breath beating against the microphone. He was trembling with a mixture of rage and confusion. Roger. Commander Irwin, you have clearance to come home, Parked croakily whispered. On a vessel traversing space at an unfathomable pace, the astronauts returned home. The craft silently landed at an unofficial NASA site on Wednesday, 15th February, 23. The GE-1 crew emerged, greeted by a small, applauding crowd. Tim Irwin, Jana Danes, and Matthias Olsson, Those were the three astronauts who supposedly emerged from the spacecraft. And, at first, we had no reason to believe anything else. We recognized the three faces, the three voices, the three brilliant minds. However, it did not take long for slight oddities to slip through the cracks. I overheard something perplexing whilst Tim Irwin spoke to his wife, Melissa Irwin, in the break room. "I love you." "Melody," the astronaut said. Melissa frowned, smiling awkwardly. "Melody? Who is Melody?" I didn't intend to eavesdrop. I'd been helping myself to a drink. Still, I slowed down when I heard that. Melissa was clearly teasing her exhausted husband, but there was a slight tinge of uncertainty in her voice, and I'll admit that I was a little too nosy. I pretended to weigh up 2 different drinks before I made my way out of the room. As a result, I managed to catch the tail end of the commander's strange fumble. Irwin cleared his throat. I'm sorry, honey. I forgot my wife's name." Melissa laughed, finishing his sentence. "No worries. Honey, it's Melissa. I didn't realize I had to worry about you finding another woman in space." "I know your name," Tim icily sliced. I froze, halfway out of the door, as Melissa replied with a timid voice. "Sorry." I know. I was only joking," she assured. "Your head must be all over the place. You look like you need a good rest." I laughed to myself once I was out of earshot, but I felt the same as Melissa. Something was slightly uneven about Tim's disposition. It wasn't simply a sleep-deprived brain. I knew that, and she knew that. The commander's voice changed when his wife confronted him. It didn't sound like the astronaut any longer. I didn't know Tim incredibly well, but I knew that he was different. Whatever the case, I would have forgotten about the entire thing, dismissing my gut feeling as the result of a nerve-wracking week or two. Everybody had been unsettled since GE-1 lost its signal. We were still recovering from the stress of those awful 7 days without any communication with the spacecraft. There is one other thing worth mentioning from the day of GE-1's return. One of my co-workers claimed to find Gianna Dane standing alone in a corridor, staring at a bathroom door, not entering, not moving. Sleep deprivation. I thought again. 1 year later, that explanation no longer sufficed. On Wednesday, 31st January, 2024, an unidentified object entered Earth's atmosphere, tumbling into the Pacific Ocean, a catastrophe that was only brought to NASA's attention because the object in question utilized advanced cloaking technology. Though it did not broadcast a signal, it was a government satellite that detected the craft. And when specialists identified that they had detected technology used by Dozen Minus, our primary government contractor, NASA immediately sent a recovery team to the ocean site. That was as much as I knew until Dr. Parker knocked on my door. "I'd appreciate your input," he said. "Pardon?" I replied, fearing, for a moment, that I'd have to join the exploration team. "You're one of only 24 people who were involved with the GE-1 project," Parker explained, as if that were enough information. "I don't understand. That project ended a year ago," I said. Dr. Parker's brow furrowed. "Please come with me, Dr. Odell." And then, after following the man to the control room, I learnt something which my brain, usually eager to embrace the unknown, wanted so desperately to unlearn. On the ocean floor, thousands of feet below the water's surface, NASA found the GE-1 spacecraft. "What?" I gasped. "We don't know," Dr. Parker replied. "I need your help, though." "Why?" I weakly asked. "I don't understand any of this. The GE-1 is sitting in a hangar, isn't it?" "Yes," Dr. Parker nodded, "but it's also sitting at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, 3,000 miles off the east coast." My face whitened, and the man nodded. "Take your time to process that," he said. "I'm still working on wrapping my head around it." After a minute or so, I finally summoned a question that I didn't find utterly foolish or uneducated. "It's the exact same spacecraft. Identical in every way? I asked. The project leader sighed. Well, yes and no. Why am I here, Dr. Parker? I asked. The recovery team has not explored the craft yet, the man replied. But we have conducted a preliminary exploration with an unmanned vessel, eerie 7. Movement was detected within the craft. Christ, I gasped. Parker continued. It's unsettling. The room is divided. Some specialists think a living organism might be down there, but others think it may have been a dislodged piece of equipment. The UV-7 didn't transmit any biological information. Anyway, that's why I wanted to bring you into the room. You're one of this organization's leading biologists. After all, I scoffed. I specialize in cell and molecular biology. This is, well, what is this? What have we even found here? Nothing, Parker said. That's my verdict. But Dr. Long disagrees. I mentioned your name to them, and I'm hoping you'll help me. How? I asked. By proving what the UV-7 has already told us, he answered. Whatever moved down there, it wasn't living. It wasn't organic in nature, unless a fish happened to. No, it couldn't have been. As I said, the UV-7 would have detected a biological signal. I agreed to offer my opinion. I shouldn't have done so, but I did. It would have been easy to ask Dr. Parker to choose someone else. Give someone else clearance. I wasn't exactly emotionally invested in the GE-1 program. It had been a year since the astronauts supposedly returned, and we'd found nothing at the source of the 784A frequency. Since then, I'd moved on to bigger and better things. Of course, everything changed when Parker revealed that an identical version of the GE-1 spacecraft existed at the bottom of the ocean. It was a discovery far beyond anything I'd experienced during 13 years at NASA. I needed an answer to the unknown. 2 hours later, with no more than 20 people in the control room, we watched live footage of the submarine's dive towards the GE-1 crash site. The mission was a joint venture between NASA and a privately contracted company, with all participating crew members legally bound to an NDA. After all, they were about to explore a spacecraft which, in the public realm, did not exist. After the initial flurry of breathtaking aquatic species, it took another 2 torturous hours for the video feed to display anything other than blackness. The vessel descended into the depths of the ocean, the part that light didn't reach. I thought about its similarity to space. I found it ridiculous to think about the fact that we have ignored a frontier on our own planet before exploring the one beyond it. So much of the ocean remains unexplored. Eventually, the contractors found the wreckage, and 2 divers, each fitted with a camera, left the submarine to explore the vessel. When they rounded the battered nose of the spacecraft, Mission Control fell silent. We all saw it at the same time, the bold letters printed on the crumpled wreckage of the sunken craft, which was half buried in the black seabed. JR1. Hearing about the discovery was one thing. Seeing it on a gargantuan screen was something else. Dr. Parker was no liar. I knew that. But I still didn't believe him until I saw the footage for myself. Breaching the airlock now, the lead diver, Barton, announced. Disturbed water swirled into a stream of bubbles, clouding the lens of Barton's camera as he used a piece of specialized drilling equipment. It was a long and arduous process, during which Mission Control only had a limited view of the spectacle through the camera of Lee, the second diver. That'll do it, Barton's colleague said. The bubbles started to disperse as the drill ceased, and we watched the 2 explorers break the airlock's mechanism. Before pulling the hatch towards them, they revealed a void within the opening, and the lights on their headsets did very little to illuminate the innards of the craft. I sensed that the 2 men were apprehensive about entering the wreckage. They likely knew very little about NASA's GE-1 program. That, in the end, was for the best. We all long for that privilege. Entering the vehicle, Barton uneasily said. The lead diver swam through the opening, followed a couple of seconds later by Lee, who may well have been on the verge of turning and retreating to the submarine. The split screen revealed 2 pieces of footage, barely different in perspective. Two views of the same bleak, water-filled tunnel. The entrance to a vessel that had once traversed space, only to meet its end in a watery grave. "Are we broadcasting clear footage?" Lee asked. "Yes," Dr. Parker responded. "If you follow the main hallway, you'll reach GE-1's flight deck." Not seeing any obstructions, Barton said, "Should be manageable." The pair continued to swim through the hallway of the craft, which, as Barton had noted, was remarkably intact. None of the carnage and chaos we'd expected to find. Then again, we shouldn't have been surprised. There were minimal tears in the exterior of the craft, given the level of investment placed into developing a vessel far beyond mankind's perceived capabilities. What did not seem plausible was Parker's explanation that we were looking at a carbon copy of an existing spacecraft, one which I'd watched land on Earth a year earlier. I had no reason to believe that everybody in the room had to be lying to me, but something in my brain refused to compute such an impossibility. I wouldn't have ever believed Dr. Parker, even if I'd gone to the hangar and physically seen the craft in person before swimming to the bottom of the ocean to view its twin. Even after everything I've seen, I still try hard not to believe any of it. "Oh, Jesus," Barton cried. It only took a second for the camera to reveal what the diver had seen. The hellish scene that had sparked such a haunted response, and I unleashed a similar yelp of terror. We all recoiled fearfully. In fact, I suppose none of us had hypothesized what we might find in the wreckage, even when the debate about movement and biological signatures had raged. There was no joyous hysteria. Nobody seemed exuberant to find 3 floating spacesuits at the front of the spacecraft. Spacesuits that were not empty. Spacesuits that were, surprisingly, intact. It had taken roughly a day or so, since the GE-1 crash, for the divers to breach the vessel, 24 hours for the bodies to decompose underwater. The skin of each astronaut was discolored and wounded with haunting, razor-thin gashes, but their gaunt faces were unmistakable. The 2 men and 1 woman, each wearing a scream to the grave, were the 3 astronauts who had returned to Earth 1 year earlier. Worst of all was the corpse of Commander Tim Irwin. The upper half of his helmet and the head within had been cleanly severed above his gaping mouth. That explained the rotten nature of his remaining lower half. In comparison to Diane's and Olsen, who were each encased in a suit without oxygen, the ship's oxygen would have lasted at least a month or so, resulting in partial decay of Irwin's remaining face, exposed by the savagely sawn helmet. The lower half of his face bore holes in the cheeks, revealing teeth behind. One scientist murmured that the 3 scientists may have died long before impact. Within a sealed spacesuit, lacking oxygen, the decomposition process would be slowed. Of course, that only raised more terrified questions. One, in particular, played on my mind. Why were the astronauts wearing suits inside the spacecraft? A technical engineer gave a probable explanation for the ship's return. The GE-1 was programmed with a homing initiative. In the event of life loss, or 24 hours without manual piloting, the craft's motherboard was programmed to assume automatic control of GE-1 and steer it back to Earth. The re-entry might have failed because the ship was damaged. That might also explain why we didn't receive a signal from its transmitter. Honestly, it's a miracle that the GE-1 made it back to Earth at all, the engineer said. We'll know more when we look at the ship's log, another engineer added. Dr. Parker sighed. Barton, we need you to. We have to get out of here, Lee yelled, shouting over Dr. Parker. I didn't sign up for this. Look, we did the dive. You've seen what you needed to see. I understand that this is a terrible situation, Parker continued. You were, however, briefed. You signed a contract, Mr. Lay. The nature of the expedition was made clear to you, and we don't have all of the information that we need. We need you to recover as much of the ship's data as possible. Do you have the drive? Yes, Barton murmured, dazed by the 3 floating corpses. Right, Parker replied. You should see the socket on the right-hand side. The lead diver swam towards the main console, searching anxiously with the navigational assistance of every expert in the room. When he finally inserted the drive into the designated socket, a red light flickered beside it. "What does that mean?" Barton asked. "You were right," Ian, one of the technical engineers, said to his colleague. "It's not good. Mr. Barton, it means that some of the ship's log files are corrupted." "All of them?" Dr. Parker asked. The engineer rubbed his chin. "Well, if there'd been no light at all, this would have been a lost cause. So, there's still hope. It'll be the water damage. No doubt about that. Just leave the drive in the socket. Mr. Barton, let it run when the light turns off. That means the data transfer has finished." Meanwhile, Lee was scanning the ship with equipment for detecting organic matter. I was standing by, waiting for the diver's device to detect some sign of life, something that would warrant me being in the room, but there was nothing. I was the uncomfortable biologist in the corner, only there, it seemed, to endure the horror alongside everyone else. Something that did intrigue Mission Control, however, was Lee's discovery of floating glass shards in Daines's laboratory. Most people wouldn't pay attention to suspended glass fragments in an underwater wreckage. The diver certainly didn't understand the commotion from the scientists, and neither did I. But Lee indulged Dr. Parker when he was instructed to collect a sample. "It's just broken glass," I naively thought, frowning. 10 minutes later, when the data transfer completed, Barton recovered the drive, and the two divers were beyond happy to receive the go-ahead from Dr. Parker to leave the site. The men returned to the submarine, the transmission ended, and everybody in the control room dispersed. I didn't sleep that night. Of course, no sane person would manage a good night's sleep after such an awful discovery. When I went into work that morning, I hadn't expected to see video footage of 3 dead astronauts. More terrifying than that, I hadn't expected to see footage of 3 corpses who I'd seen return to Earth, alive and well. "Earl?" Dr. Parker half barked. I was sitting in my office, boring into the wall with a 1,000-yard stare. It took the man 3 attempts to catch my attention. Using my first name had triggered something in my brain, taken me out of myself for a moment, reminded me that this was all real. No matter how hard I tried to dissociate and detach myself, I was excruciatingly intertwined with the horror. "Dr. Parker," I replied, unable to say anything else. "I'm afraid I have to ask you, once again, to come with me," the man said, seeming far paler than usual. "We just reviewed the data from the GE-1 wreckage." "What did you find?" I whispered, voice breaking. Parker sighed. "If you come to my office, you'll see. I really need your opinion." That seemed like a lie to me. Dr. Parker had been talking about the importance of my opinion as a biologist since the start of the GE-1 program. In the end, I'd simply been a limp, lifeless limb, hardly even a backup appendage, just some excess fat that somebody had forgotten to trim. As it would transpire, however, Dr. Parker had finally found something that required my input. Out of 102 audio files on the drive, only 2 were uncorrupted. 2 recordings from Commander Tim Irwin. Within those recordings, Dr. Parker heard something he didn't understand. Heard many things he didn't understand. Unfortunately, I scarcely understood the recordings either. What little I did understand, however, horrified me, and I saw that coming. It was foreshadowed by the project leader, by his haunted eyes. The board need to know whether they've found something alien in nature. Dr. Odell, I still don't think it's not organic. I don't believe that. They won't listen to me, Dr. Parker said, but they'll listen to you. I could tell that the man no longer believed his own words. He wanted me to prove him wrong. File 86. This is Commander Tim Irwin. I am recording this message at 14:40 on Thursday, 7 February, 2023, Greenwich Mean Time. Since 12:15 today, We have been unable to contact Mission Control. Olsen has not pinpointed any malfunction, so we hope that all remains well back home. The three of us are contemplating the possibility that the issue with our broadcasting signal stems from what we have discovered, the source of the 784A frequency. We found it, and, given what we have experienced over the past 2 hours, I believe it to be vital for me to record our findings. In the absence of any communication with Dr. Parker, at roughly 12:35, shortly after losing contact with home, we finally saw a physical manifestation of the frequency that we've been hunting for 8 days. We were starting to think there would be nothing there. We'd been eyeing blackness for hours, believing that the transmission had no visible source. It was when we neared a mile, or less, from the signal source that we finally saw something tangible. I'm still struggling to describe our discovery. Well, at first, we didn't know how to put it into words. Now, however, I suppose I'd say that we were pursuing an ever-moving belt of glass shards. Yes, glass shards. You heard me correctly. Thousands of small, glass-like fragments hurtling through the cosmos. Jagged pieces of some unknown material. No sign of biological life. No sign of foreign technology. Just a near-transparent substance, with no technological or organic nature, somehow transmitting the 784A frequency. That revelation might disappoint some people back home, those hoping for signs of alien life. Still, I know that Dr. Parker and other minds behind this mission will be extremely fascinated by this discovery. At 12:55, after a brief preparation period, we used the B-1 craft to retrieve a sample of glass from the moving belt. I understand that, though we were cleared to use the equipment without approval, Dr. Parker may be a little disheartened. I know he wanted to experience this with us. I just hope he'll understand. We didn't want to wait for the line of communication to reopen. After all, we didn't know whether we'd have another opportunity. We had no way of knowing how the mysterious belt of glass would react to our presence. Even though GE1 still wasn't picking up organic or electronic signatures, Diane's keeps talking about the possibility of something sentient lurking in the shards. Until we detect something organic, I doubt that. The belt was, and still is, moving at a rather glacial pace of roughly 6,000 miles per hour. We will have no trouble pursuing it in the GE1. As I speak, we are trundling alongside the glass stream at a crawl. It stretches for hundreds of miles. Who knows how many shards are contained within the stream? With regards to recovering glass pieces from the belt, the B-1 craft suffered catastrophic damage, which intrigued us. No form of glass on Earth would be powerful enough, even at such a speed, to tear through the B-1's reinforced hull. That only confirmed what we already knew. This isn't glass. It isn't anything we understand. Upon realizing that, we knew we had to retrieve a sample, regardless of the damage to B-1. The small craft only managed to collect a meager handful of passing shards. But that was enough. We didn't want to push our luck, so we brought it back within a matter of minutes. I'll send over the data logs as soon as the communication is fixed. You'll see what I mean. The miniature vessel was almost obliterated by the belt, and we didn't want to lose an opportunity to claim at least something. At 13:20, Dr. Gianna Dianes examined the 7 shards, recovered by the B-1 craft, in her laboratory. She instructed Olsen and I to wear protective gear before joining her. As she had no idea exactly what we'd found, we giddily watched Dianes conduct her tests. She was giddy too, in all honesty, though she attempted to maintain a professional composure. We're aware, whatever we've retrieved, that it is unlike anything humanity has seen before. Dr. Dianes confirmed, around 14:20, what we'd seen in GE1's data. The shards do not contain organic matter. Each piece is composed of a raw material not present on Earth or any other planet we've ever explored. Shortly before I started this recording, however, Olsen became a little jittery. He told Dianes and me that he saw one of the shards enlarge, or, at least, move in some form. It was likely a trick of the lighting. Of course, Dianes took him seriously, but she found no evidence of any change in the material. I suggested that we set up cameras to record the laboratory. Diane's and Olsen agreed. That'll ensure we don't miss anything. I'll send everything to mission control as soon as Olsen has figured out how to fix the transmitter, though he assures me that it remains unbroken. Bizarre. Anyway, interference from the 784A frequency seems to be the most likely explanation, but we're still unsure. I will continue to log daily updates. For now, the three of us need to get some rest. It's been a historic day, but we're shattered. None of us have slept in over a day. This is Commander Tim Irwin, audio file 86, terminating recording at 1450. I need you to brace yourself, Dr. Parker said. I snapped back into reality, having been fully immersed in the wonder of the crew's discovery. Much like Commander Irwin, I'd almost forgotten the gravity of the situation, forgotten the terror that NASA had found at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. Brace myself for what? The next audio file? I asked. Dr. Parker nodded. We just listened to 86. The only other uncorrupted recording is 99. So, we're missing 12 files in between those? I asked. Yes, he answered, and 3 files after 99. The board doesn't care about the first 85 audio files, the ones before we lost contact with GE1, meaningless updates that would likely mirror whatever Commander Irwin was telling Mission Control on a daily basis. But the audio recordings from 86 to 102 detail whatever happened after the vessel went dark. Those are perhaps the most valuable pieces of data this organization currently possesses. Right. Is file 99 useful? I asked. The doctor's lip quivered as he hovered his unsteady index finger over the mouse, contemplating whether to inflict such horror upon me. I wish he hadn't. Useful, that's an interesting word. I don't know, Dr. Odell. It tells one horrifying part of a story we don't understand, Parker croaked, before clicking. File 99. This is Irwin. 9, file 99. Since the last few recordings, it's all over, and things were already terrible. This must be my 5th recording today. I'm sorry. Sorry for the backlog of files for you to... Oh, who cares? Why am I apologizing to anyone? Nobody's there. Nobody will ever be there. I'll be lost to space. And, well, I hope somebody hears it. There's the protocol. After all, the return protocol. I'm no engineer, but I remember Olsen talking about it. If GE1 makes it back to Earth, I hope these recordings make sense to you. Whoever's listening, none of this makes sense to me. And it's even worse now Diane's is gone. She died at, I don't know, 22:10, perhaps. Fuck. It's Tuesday, 7th February, 22:40. I'm the only surviving member of the GE1 crew. You know how it happened. I just want her family to know that I tried to save her. Oh, God. This all started with a reckless endeavor. We should have turned around when we saw the vessel outside the window. It's still there. I'm looking at it now. J1, an identical version of our spacecraft, eyeballing me from the belt, impervious to the racing current of glass. You know what? I'd like to amend my statement. We should have turned around as soon as we lost contact with Mission Control. This was written on the wall. Everything about the belt was wrong. We knew it. But we were drooling from our mouths like apes. Olsen's idea was smart. It was smart. It just wasn't enough. We should have thought about B1, thought about how the glass tore through it. Olsen promised, however, that this would be different. The belt was moving so quickly. After all, he said the shards weren't as dangerous outside of the belt. We wanted to believe him. Maybe I still want to believe him. After all, I'm wearing my suit, even though I know it didn't save him. And it didn't save Diane's either. I spent most of the day trying to stop the bleeding. But it was awful. You heard it. You don't need me to tell you. I still hear her words ringing in my ears. The things she described. The way it cut into her skin and then disappeared. The glass disappeared after hacking her face to pieces. It was so methodical and quick. So eerily quick, but not in a merciful way. Her dying scream will never leave my mind. Neither will the sight of that sharp shard, unbound by the laws of physics, slicing her face with clean, swift motions. a weapon wielded by an unseen force. I've locked the lab. That won't be enough, will it? It wasn't enough to stop. Oh, there it goes. That's why I wanted to record this. I keep seeing something in the copied version of the GE-1 spacecraft, gliding 100 yards away from the real one. I keep seeing movement behind the windows. Oh, God, 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 God. No, there's no God. Not in there. I see them so clearly now. But they're dead. Olsen and Diane's are dead. Their bodies are still sitting in the control room. I'm looking at them, and they're across the way, surveying me from the flight deck of the copied craft. What is happening? What is this? I don't. They won't stop looking at me. They won't stop. I want to turn around. I want to stop following the belt. I've wanted to abandon the mission for days, but Diane's made a good point. After Olsen passed, she said that we shouldn't head back with the shards on board. We were just too frightened to go near the glass after he died. Without Diane's, I don't see myself solving this. I just have to soldier onwards. Keep tracking things. Keep moving. I'll record an update tomorrow, but I won't abandon this mission. Not until I talk to somebody from Mission Control. Whatever material we found, I don't think I should come home unless I get rid of it. Wait. Do you hear that? That's what I heard before. When it happened to Diane's. When the glass moved. Changed into something, I don't know. It looked like liquid. Like a thin trail of water with a slight sheen. It crawled across the walls before climbing her suit and somehow slithering beneath the visor. I don't know how it entered. And then it started solidifying. She was running around, screaming, wrestling with her own helmet. Give me a second. I need to check the lab. Yes, there are fewer pieces of glass. That's the other thing. There are only 4 shards. We collected 7 from the belt. There were definitely 7, then 6. After the mirrored version of the GE-1 craft appeared outside the window. 5, after we found Olsen's body in the airlock. 4, after it took Diane's. Wait, no. There were 4 after Diane's died, at 22:10. It's 22:43, and I only see 3 shards in there, sitting on her desk. But the door's locked. There's no sign of exit. Where did the 4th one go? Where did it fucking go? God fucking damn it. I don't know how much longer I'll be able to wait. I want to come home more than anything. See Melissa, see the little ones. But that's exactly why I won't come back. It would be selfish. It wouldn't be right to let them live on an Earth with the risk of these shards.
Stop looking at me! Both of you! Stop it!
What are you? You're not them. They're dead. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for recording all of this. It would have been better not to know, wouldn't it? It would have been better not to know. Commander Tim Irwin, audio file, 99, terminating recording at 22:45. After the audio ended, Dr. Parker and I sat quietly. Not silently. I could hear my own heartbeat in the quaking canals of my ears. I could hear the project leader hyperventilating, failing to hide a fearful murmur that sounded at the back of his throat. He'd already heard the 2 files. Of course, I had no idea how he'd managed to maintain any semblance of professionalism. He knew what was coming. He knew what I was about to hear. But he said nothing, did nothing. I was crumbling from the haunting revelations in the last surviving recording of Commander Irwin. I hated Dr. Parker for involving me in the GE-1 program. Think about what we saw, the man eventually whispered. I looked at him without uttering a word, giving the scientist time to continue. Think about the body of Tim Irwin, Parker explained. What remained of it? I need, more than anything in the world, to hear file 102, the commander's final recording on Friday 17th of February, 23. That was after the GE-1 landed. I said. He shuddered. It wasn't the GE-1, Dr. Odell. You know that now. I'm thinking about the shards recovered from the wreckage. What happened to those? I asked, gripped by a fresh wave of terror. Dr. Parker lowered his head. Scientists are examining the fragments. Dr. Zealand's team, now you've listened to the audio files, I'd like you to lend your expertise in his laboratory. Right. Well, I've remembered something else. I said, the video footage from the dive. Do you remember seeing the glass in GE1's laboratory? I've hardly thought of anything else, he replied. Commander Irwin said, in the final uncorrupted recording, that only 3 shards remained, but there were more than 3 shards in that water. I quivered. Parker frowned. I don't know what to say to that. Earl, the shards could have shattered during the crash, split into numerous smaller fragments. I didn't believe that. Not from the description the commander had given. These were sturdy, unnatural things, things which could change shape and state, not things that would shatter. Anyway, Dr. Odell, the scientist muttered, clearing his throat. Before we go to Zealand's lab, I'd like to ask for your opinion. GE1 found no evidence of organic matter in the belt. Dr. Gianna Diane's found no evidence of organic matter in the shard samples. Given the commander's description in File 99, however, do you think that the ship's data log may have been wrong? Do you think Dr. Diane's may have been wrong? I sighed. There isn't enough evidence for me to give a definite answer to that question. Dr. Parker, not until I see the shards for myself. I regretted saying that. I didn't want to see the shards. I wanted to run away, wash my hands of the whole thing. File 99 had filled me with a bottomless dread that I didn't realize the human body could experience. It haunted me. The thought of an unfeeling thing stealing one's form and then shredding that same person to pieces. The commander was right. It would be the worst thing imaginable for the substance to make its way back to Earth. But it was all over when the glass mimicked the spacecraft. The shards have already been here for a year. You're too late, Dr. Zealand said. That line snapped my mind into action. I had zoned out of the earlier conversation with the scientist, still trying desperately to process the horror of the past few days. It was nearly impossible to process something far beyond our world, something the human mind has not evolved to process. Dr. Parker scoffed. Dr. Odell needs to... Dr. Odell is too late. Zealand interrupted. We disposed of the shards this morning. I beg your pardon? I asked. The fragments were dangerous. The audio recordings made that abundantly clear. Dr. Long ordered us to destroy the samples, Dr. Zealand said. At that moment, Veronica Riding emerged from the lab, which was being barricaded by Dr. Zealand's hulking form. The sheepish woman was pushing a trolley of black waste bags, and she seemed to be trying to avoid detection. Regardless, hope sparked in my mind, as Veronica was a close friend of mine, not just a colleague. I hoped she would clear up the strangeness of the situation. The idea of NASA discarding such an important historical find seemed unthinkable to me. It was a lovely thought. There's no denying that. I wanted to entertain the possibility of the agency putting mankind's safety before mankind's progression. But I'm not a moron. Veronica, I called. Is it true? What was that? Dr. Odell? She asked, stopping to face me. My body temperature lowered. As I eyed the face of my dear friend, I felt the shift. I didn't see a physical difference in Veronica's appearance. As such, the shift in my fractured mind was more subtle than that. It was a feeling that whisked the contents of my gut. Veronica always called me Earl. Story 8. Something is rearranging my furniture every night. Ever since I was a young boy, I would wake up in the morning with my furniture arranged differently than when I went to sleep. Sometimes it was small, like my lamp in the wrong place or my shoe rack was tipped over. Other days I'd wake up and the bed would be in the wrong spot, the dresser on the wrong wall, my deck in front of the door. In the beginning, it wasn't in a messy fashion. It seemed like a perfectly normal way to arrange my bedroom, just in a different way than I preferred. I have a very early memory from around 5 years old of my mom yelling at me for moving around all my furniture at night. I swore up and down that it wasn't me. She seemed conflicted when she was yelling at me. I wasn't a troublemaker. She knew it wasn't something I would do. But looking back now, I think she was just scared of the thought of it not being me. After a couple of hours, I convinced my mum it wasn't me. After all, I was a small kid. I don't think I could have physically moved it on my own. Next to blame was my older brother. He was 11 at the time, so it still would have been hard for him to move my stuff, but not impossible. My brother liked to mess with me. No more than any normal brother, but never any over-the-top pranks. Mostly just because he was lazy, though. No way he'd lose sleep over something so weird like moving my furniture every night. After my brother denied it, and adding on that he stayed at his friend's house for sleepovers, often gave him an alibi. My mom attempted to blame my dad next. But of course, that comment was not taken lightly, and ended with my parents just pointing fingers at each other. My mom spent that night with me in bed. She tried her best to explain why she was sleeping in my bed without making it sound scary, but I could tell she was scared. I wasn't scared at all because it felt normal. I see now as an adult why she was freaked out. The night felt normal. If anything, it was a fun night, like a big sleepover. My first sleepover, even. We woke up the next morning and my mom gasped and gripped the sheets. Wait, how did this happen? I was right here. My mom looked around the room. It was pretty easy to do so given that the bed was right in the center of the room. This hadn't happened before. It was always in a normal spot against the wall. It was like the room was showing off, that it could put the bed in the middle of the room without us waking up. My mother always claimed to be a notoriously light sleeper. She said how she can't fully turn her brain off in case we need her in the night. But she always seemed to sleep deeply to me. The rest of the day she kept insisting that someone was sleepwaking or something. She didn't think anyone was playing a prank, but she knew someone in the house was doing it. She had to believe it. My parents ordered a Serenity camera online to put in my room so they could watch the footage the next morning. They got next day delivery, so I'd have to go one more night without them being able to watch me sleep. That night, they decided to let me sleep in their bed. I was even more excited than the night before. Now this was really a sleepover. That night, my mom tucked me in tightly in between her and my dad. I remember she held me all night long. I woke up the next morning to my mom sounding terrified. My parents' bed wasn't even in the bedroom anymore. It was sitting in the living room right outside my parents' bedroom. My dad sat up and started to get as concerned as my mom. How did our bed get out here? He whispered with a stutter. It can't even fit through the door frame. Was it taken apart and put back together out here? He hopped out of bed and picked me up into his arms in the process. We all stared at it confused. Even as a young boy, I knew something was really wrong. My dad started to take the bed apart to bring it back into their bedroom and noticed that the screws were loose. Some were even missing, like it was put back together in a rush. I remember my parents being on the phone with, I think, the police, but they never showed up. I remember my mom being upset on the phone when they wouldn't help us at all. That night, my dad installed a camera into the corner of my bedroom. My mom once again slept next to me. The camera they got was basically like a baby monitor that recorded the night. My dad had the monitor beside his bed to be an extra set of eyes. The night came and went. My mom and I woke up with my room yet again rearranged. She looked up at the camera to see that it was destroyed. All video from the night was destroyed as well. This was right around the time when baby monitors could record to an iPhone, and you could watch the video the next morning. But everything about the video was corrupted. My family went to the police station that night, insisting that someone was in our house. The cops wrote down a statement, but that's all that came of it. My parents, for the next couple of years, kept trying to figure out what was going on, trying different solutions to find out how this was happening, only to find dead ends over and over again. My mom started to believe the house was haunted, and after a couple of years, my dad believed her. This was the main reason for our move when I was 8. I was so excited to be done with whatever was going on. At this point, the sleepovers weren't cute. I wanted my own space. My parents didn't let me go to summer camp or stay at friends' houses like my brother did. I was sick of it. It was night 1 in the new place. It was only about 30 minutes from our old house. Not too big of a change, but just enough that I was excited. My parents felt so good about the new place that they let me sleep in my own bed. I remember they told me at dinner while we ate McDonald's over a makeshift table made of cardboard boxes. I jumped up and down and hugged them both. That night I got tucked in, and my mom was hesitant to leave me in my own bed. She seemed worried but knew I needed this. My room didn't have much in it, just my bed, dresser, and a few boxes with my clothes in them. I remember falling asleep that night and thinking how creaky the new house was. But I didn't mind. I was hopeful. I woke up the next morning before my mom and dad. I didn't have curtains yet, so the sunrise woke me. I sat up and stretched. I rubbed my eyes to wake myself up, and I immediately felt a knot in my throat. The furniture was moved. At that moment, I made a decision. I knew if my mom saw this, I'd be stuck sleeping next to her for my whole life. My little imagination took over, and I thought about coming home from my job one day as a grown man wearing a suit and my mom still tucking me into bed. I sprung up and quickly moved everything back to where it came from. Luckily, nothing was too heavy for me to move. Just as I got everything back into place, I heard my mom's footsteps. I jumped into bed and pretended to be sleeping. She cracked the door and let out a sigh of relief and shut the door. How I wish I could go back in time and tell my mom the truth. I spent the next month doing this same routine. My mom always woke up at 7:30 to check on me, so I'd always get up at 7 and fix everything. It was exhausting but worth it. My mom was warming up to the idea of me going to summer camp, so I was motivated. My mom got comfortable enough to send me to camp. It was only a one-night camp that year, which was fine. She needed to take baby steps. I didn't think anything would happen, honestly, but when we woke up in the morning, every single bunk bed was outside. All 20 of them, 30 kids and 10 adults, all waking up feeling confused and disoriented. Some bunk beds, even on their sides, tipped over. Of course, the camp counselors were confused. I knew what I had to do. I gaslit all the adults into believing it was the plan of the troubled kid, Eddie. I made up a whole story about how he convinced a few other kids to do it in the night. I didn't think it was believable, but I was so convincing that everyone believed me. The camp counselors wanted to inform all the parents when they came to pick up what happened. Of course, it was a violation and needed to be explained to all the parents what happened. Luckily, I got out of it. I went to the camp with a school friend, and his mom picked us up. His mom believed me when I said I'd tell my mom myself. As the years passed by, I realized no matter where I slept, this would happen to me. I turned it into a sleepover trick. I'll tell my friends to come over, and sure enough, it would happen. I'd even sleep at their houses, and it would happen. Whenever I was trying to show off the trick, the room would be in even worse condition than a normal night. I felt like I had a superpower. The years went by, and it just became my life. It was like brushing my teeth in the morning. Now and then, I'd forget to fix everything in the morning, and my mom would check on me. It only happened a few times, but each time I saw fear in her eyes. I always just said I moved stuff around the night before because I was bored of the layout. I could only use that lie so many times, though. One time in high school, I was very sick. I was having a hard time getting up in the morning to move my furniture, and I didn't move my furniture for a couple of mornings. My mom was getting nervous, and I knew I had to get up before her to move it the next day. My mom came into my bedroom to say goodnight and let me know she'd be gone in the early morning, but would say hi as soon as she got home at around noon. This was music to my ears. I could sleep in and not worry about moving everything before she could barge in. The morning came and I got to sleep until about 11. I couldn't believe how much better I was feeling. I knew I should have probably started to move my furniture and be proactive. But of course, that's not what I did. I could hear my brother in his room next door playing video games, so I went to go see what he was playing. Him being a brother, he wasn't letting me play with him, so I instead stood by his bed for way too long and annoying him. I lost track of time and heard the garage door open. My heart sank. I ran back into my room and tried to move everything back into its place. Luckily, throughout the years, I convinced my parents to get me lighter furniture. They never caught on, and it made life so much easier. Everything got replaced except for my dresser, which was a family heirloom. It wasn't all that big, but this day it felt heavy. I knew I was weak from being sick all week, but I couldn't believe how heavy it was. It was the last thing to move, but it just wouldn't budge. I frantically ran to my brother and told him I needed help moving my dresser. He leaped out of bed to run to my room. With most things, he doesn't care to help me. But I was always honest with my brother that the furniture thing never stopped. He knew that if our mom knew, our whole house would be a living hell, and she might even make us move again. He always had my back when it came to my supernatural furniture. Instead of going back into my room, I went downstairs to distract my mom. I knew she'd be mad to see me out of bed, but the consequences of my furniture being out of place would be so much worse. My socks slid across the hardwood floor, and I reached the kitchen just as she was opening the door. Her happy humming was immediately interrupted when she made eye contact with me. She set a grocery bag on the counter and got out some soup she just bought at the store. I thought she was going to yell at me, but I wasn't going to question it. I figured she was being patient with me since I was sick. Just as she got out a box of popsicles, I heard an awful sound, one that I will never forget. A sound that is completely my fault. I heard my brother scream. It was a loud scream, but short, like something interrupted it. It sounded like he stubbed his toe and then covered his mouth halfway through. My mom and I made eye contact and started to head upstairs to check on him. It was too loud to be something small. We turned the corner into my room and I didn't know what to feel. I saw my dresser still not in its normal spot, but just slightly moved from where I left it. The dresser had a big drawer on the front that opened up like a door or a cabinet, and it was wide open and empty. But most importantly, my brother was gone. An hour went by and my brother was nowhere to be found. The doors to the house seemed to all be locked. Same with the windows. We ended up filing a missing persons report. A whole week went by and there was no sign of him. My mom thought my brother was in the middle of moving my furniture to prank me or something and got spooked and ran off. I didn't have the heart to tell her or anyone that I felt like this was my fault. I thought that maybe whatever was moving my stuff wanted just me to move it or something. After that awful week, we found something to make it so much worse. My dad was in my room with me and trying to ask more questions about our last interaction. A lot of people asked me this since I was the last person to see my brother. As I explained it to him for the 100th time, he was randomly looking at the dresser and opened up the big door we originally found wide open. It had a note taped to the inside. Before my dad took it, he looked nervously at me, asking if it was mine, but he very well already knew the answer. We called my mom into the room before we read it. The following is an exact quote from the note. "I see our little game of hide and seek did not end like I imagined. Your brother is not who I intended to find me, but he will have to do for now." We had no clue what the note meant, but that didn't stop it from sending shivers down my spine. At the very least, now we knew someone had taken my brother. We thought the cops would do more to help now that we had a note. While they did do a little more to help us find him, they never found anything else. I never saw my brother again. Last year I moved out of my parents' house. This decision was completely based on my not wanting to move my furniture around every morning. I couldn't imagine a world where I could leave my furniture as is and just sleep in without the worry of my mum seeing it. That being said, I moved out as soon as I could afford it. I moved in with my best friend and we shared an apartment. He knew about my little party trick and was never too freaked out by it. Although part of me was scared that once he saw it was legit, he would be scared. The first morning I woke up and the room was a mess. Everything was in the wrong place, just as usual. Although I didn't think there would even be a usual for how my room looked anymore. I was sick of fixing it. It was going to look however it wanted to look. After a couple of days of just letting my furniture do whatever, I noticed how it was being arranged was more and more chaotic. Monsieur. Like the furniture was mad that I wasn't putting it all back. I started straightening things, but nothing too wild. I'd just leave the big stuff. I mean, my roommate was weirded out, but he didn't care at first. One morning, about 2 weeks into living at the new place, I woke up with my bed on our deck outside. I knew it was going to start getting out of hand. The whole reason for me moving out was to not have to move my furniture around like crazy. I was so mad I couldn't just leave the furniture as it was. For some reason, it had to be put back to its normal spot. I let it go one more morning. I wanted to see what would happen if I left it just once more. I woke up the next day in the middle of the woods with no clue where I was. It felt like when I was a kid, and this happened with bunk beds, but this was so much worse. It was relatively easy to find my way back, but just a long walk. In all, it took me about 2 hours to get home, not to mention having to figure out how to get my bed back home. When I got back, my roommate had a chat with me. He said how he never really thought the weird furniture thing was real and thought it was a very elaborate joke, and now that he lived with me, it was affecting his mental health. He felt paranoid and really tired and wanted me to move out. I was of course bummed, but knew it was for the best. I tried to tell him I'd start moving the furniture back every morning and it would all be okay, but that didn't seem to help him feel better. I called my parents to tell them I was coming back home. They seemed excited to have me come home. They seemed very cheerful, actually. When I asked them what was making them so happy, they said they felt better than they had in years and felt so well rested. It felt nice to hear them happy for what felt like the first time since my brother went missing. I had most of my stuff packed up and was ready to move in just a couple of days. We both knew this whole moving thing might cause problems with our friendship, so we wanted to do something fun before I moved out. We did a spontaneous week-long road trip. The morning I left, I didn't move any of the furniture back. It didn't seem necessary. I noticed something strange about the road trip. At no point in the trip did my furniture move. It was the first time since I can remember I woke up with everything looking the same. I thought maybe I found some kind of weird hack. We got back from an amazing trip feeling closer than ever, feeling thankful that we did it. I walked into my room and saw everything just as I remembered leaving it the day we left for our trip. Everything except for my dresser with the front facing down right in the middle of the room. I went over to the front of it to try and lift it into place, but it felt heavy. I immediately felt the memories of the day my brother went missing flash back into my head. This thing being heavy is bad news. I wasn't sure why, but I knew I didn't like it. I called my roommate in to help me move it. At first, he was hesitant. He didn't want anything to do with my furniture. Finally, I convinced him to just help me lift it quickly. As we pushed it back up to the wall, the body of a man came falling out. He was dead and limp. Claw marks filled the inside of my dresser. It looked like it fell over while he was hiding in it. He most likely fell over at the beginning of our trip and couldn't get out. He was in the same spot where I found that ominous note a little while back. He also had a gas tank that had a sleeping aid in it that was connected to one of those things that go over your mouth and nose before surgery or something. He looked malnourished and sickly. This man was my ghost for the last 15 years, moving my furniture around, thinking it was some kind of fun game or something. This was the man who took my brother. This was the man who gave a sleeping aid to me and everyone else I lived with, so he could move my furniture around for me. This was the man who took away countless sleepovers from my childhood. This was the man who stole my mother's peace of mind my whole childhood, so I could have some sick game every morning. They never found out who he was. They couldn't find anyone that matched his fingerprints or dental records or anything at all. It's like it never even existed. Most of all, they never found my brother. They never found out how the man got in and out of my house, if he even left, or how he was always around no matter where I slept. They never figured out how he managed to sneak around my living space for so long and not be seen. That was last year, and after that day, my furniture never moved again. Story 9. Maize flowers. Growing up in Vermont is not the most exciting thing in the world. I grew up in Stowe. It's a small town with a lot of charm. Basically, unless you live there, it's a rotating door of tourists, which is pretty annoying, especially in the fall winter. It hoards a lot of mountains, and getting lost is extremely common. Since it was just me, my mom and sister, we spent a lot of time at my grandparents' house, which, to be honest, as a kid, sucked. They lived in this old colonial in the mountains, which means cell service sucked. Wi-Fi was always spotty, and riding my bike into town was impossible because they lived in the middle of nowhere. I will never forget the spring of 2004. I was 14 and my sister was 5. My grandparents were getting fed up with the two of us staying inside all day. My grandfather came into my room and told me it's not healthy staying inside all day, and instructed me to take my sister outside and go play. Of course, being a teenager, I rolled my eyes and said, well, there's nothing to do outside and I don't want to be a babysitter. He did not take that well. Grandpa suggested that I take my sister Lily on a hike since I'm always roaming around the woods. As a side note, the only reason I would go into the woods was to get a good signal to call my friends. I knew those woods like the back of my hand. My dad and I would always go on hikes before he died. The trails were easy to navigate, so I just decided instead of getting into an argument, I would take Lily into the woods and explore for 30 minutes so they can get off of my back. Lily was so excited. I went downstairs and she had her backpack ready and we were off. The woods were extremely beautiful, and walking with Lily gave me flashbacks of when me and Dad would go hiking. My grandparents offered us to take Diego, their German shepherd, with us, but I was over this whole ordeal and waved that suggestion off. I mean, looking after a dog and Lily in the woods was way too inconvenient for my sassy teenage self. Somehow, after 20 minutes of sulking and not paying attention, I realized we had veered off of the trail. At this moment, my dumb teenage ass regretted not bringing Diego. He always went hunting with my grandpa and knew these woods very well. After walking around for an hour, I started to go into panic mode. I told myself, okay, do not look worried. If I do, then Lily will start to worry I can do this. To my surprise, Lily brought a compass with her. I thought, good job, genius. At least we can finally get out of here. The only thing was, when I took the compass from my sister, it looked like it was going crazy. It was an electric one. When I looked at it, the digital numbers were going bananas, and everywhere we walked, it stayed at southeast. That pissed me off because after my moment of relief, the damn compass was fried. Eventually, which felt like hours, we found this strange clearing. It was a huge circular field surrounded by flowers. In the background stood an old, disheveled house. That's not the part that scared me. What did was the smoke pouring out of the chimney. I started to turn around, but Lily was gone. I saw her running in the field towards the house. Once she got to the door, she innocently tried to knock on it, but before she could, the door opened. A young woman who seemed like she was around the age of 25 came outside. Lily started talking to her, and I don't know what she said, but when I got to the door, the women had already invited us inside. We're going to die. We're going to die. We're lost and no one is going to find our bodies. Why the fuck didn't I bring Diego, was all that was running through my mind. The house was odd. It looked much bigger on the inside. It had an upstairs and a basement. This didn't make sense because the house from outside showed no indication of a second floor. And where did this basement come from? Oh yeah, that's the basement where we're going to die in. Good job for not paying attention. I can see it now. Teenage girl and sister go missing because teenager failed to give a shit about anything but herself. The young woman was making soup and decided that we looked rough and needed to eat. Sitting across from the woman, all I could do was stare at her. She was beautiful. Ocean blue eyes, long brown hair, her skin was perfect in a China doll way. Her lips looked like God had painted them on. Then she started asking questions. First our names. I was hesitant, but Lily said, "Hi, my name is Lily. I'm 5 years old. This is my sister Rose. She is 14 and really crabby." This was embarrassing. The woman introduced herself as May. It made sense because that name fit her perfectly. She loved the fact we had flower names. I told her I was named after my grandmother, and my parents just went with the flower theme. May started asking us weird questions. Then she said, "I am going to ask each of you 3 questions. Please answer them honestly." Okay, weird, I thought, but we're lost with a strange woman, so just go with the flow so she can tell us how to get out of here. She asked Lily, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" "I want to be, well, I guess a dentist. I love to smile, and a dentist is what my best friend's mom is." She replied. "Okay, Lily, what is something you really want?" Was the second question. I really want a horse. My friends have horses and they even get to ride them. My mom says I can't ride a horse because we don't have enough money." The last question she asked Lily was, "If you could live in any country, which one would you choose?" Oh, I would totally live in Germany. They have good food and I love pretzels. Strange answer, I thought, but she's 5. Now it was my turn. I thought of all the questions she asked Lily, so I was prepared. She looked at me in a stern but fragile way. The first question she asked me was different. She asked, "What is the one thing I miss the most in this world?" I was taken aback by it, but I knew what I missed the most. I told her my dad, he's the one thing I miss the most. I think because I was older, my questions were not as, I guess, kid-friendly. Next thing she asks, do you want to be smart or popular? That question was so random, I told her I would rather be smart because people today suck. The last question she asked was, what's your favorite thing to eat? I told her I would love to have my dad's famous risotto again. She simply said, it is right through the bushes, you can't miss it. But before you go, I want to give you guys something. She had given me a red rose and a lily. Well, a lily. I thought, okay, that's pretty cute. We exited the house and I asked, will we ever see you again? She responded, after today I can see you, but you won't see me. I have one request, you must forget you are here. I'm not worried about your sister because she is young, but you. I give you this warning, for if anyone finds out about this, you will be one of my flowers. That scared the hell out of me, so I ran. After we got through the bushes, I noticed my grandparents' house. What in the fuck? No, we were not this close to home. I turned around to get Lily, and the field had disappeared. I could not stop thinking about May and the warning she gave me, but whatever, I'm home now. When we got into the house, my mom and grandparents were in a frenzy. Where were you? We have been looking for you for hours. She told my grandma to call Dan and tell him the kids are safe. I almost dropped dead in my tracks. My blood had drained from my body. I was frozen. The front door opens and it was my dad. His name is Dan. Where in the hell were you? He asked. All I could do was stand there thinking, this is not real. You are not here. I'm losing my mind. Lily paid no attention to it and ran into my dad's arms shouting, Daddy! Like she had just seen him a few hours ago. The ride home was strange. We were going a different way and pulled into a strange driveway. This is not my house. We do not live in a 2-story modern colonial near town. And why in the hell do I see stables? I didn't want to say anything and just went with this new universe I'm living in. Lily asks my dad if she can ride her horse Cody. What in the fuck is a Cody, I thought. My dad told her no because he's making risotto. That made my soul leave my body. While sitting at the dinner table, still looking pale and trying to process what's happening, my mom asks, so did you write your speech yet? Clueless me replies, what speech are you talking about? Lily laughs and says your smart person speech. What the fuck is a smart person speech? My dad chimes in, Rose, you worked so hard. Your valedictorian speech? Duh! You only graduate 8th grade once, dear. Valedictorian? Me, huh? Yeah, right, I'm on academic probation. Then I remembered the question May asked me, the smart or popular question. My eyeballs almost popped out of my head. Still confused. Me and Lily were at our grandparents' again, while our parents were at work. My friend Sarah, who my grandparents don't approve of, came over. She lives right down the road and I wanted to hang out. We did the usual hangout. Gossip, but this time she brought weed with her. Great, the new valedictorian is going to be getting baked with the frowned upon kid. While hiding out in the woods, getting high, we stumbled upon something I've never seen before. When did this graveyard get here? I asked her while coughing up a lung. Shit, girl, you don't know? Oh, have I got a story to tell you? She told the story of who else may. My skin went as pale as it did when my dad came through the door. Who the fuck is May, trying to play it off? She explained the flowers and the young girl in the woods. Then she said, like May tells people not to talk about her or you'll like die or something, and this is the infamous graveyard of all the kids who snitch on her. Now I know you're high because everyone knows that story. She then proceeded to tell me that if you do encounter May in the woods and tell someone, she will appear and either kill you or turn you into a flower. If you see her, run away because it's a trap. Whatever flower she gives you after asking 3 questions is what you will turn into. Apparently we were at a graveyard where May killed a bunch of people, allegedly. Years go by, I've accepted that my life has changed and to just go with it. Lily had already forgotten about May, but I absolutely did not. Lily went off to the University of New Hampshire and became a dental surgeon. Go figure. And her husband, an orthodontist, had met on a German study abroad program. Every question we answered came true. I aced my SATs and got into Yale on a full ride, where I graduated valedictorian. Once both of my grandparents died, I took over the old colonial. It was much better than the shitty apartment I was in. I work remote, so it was not a huge problem. Every night I would sit on that deck staring out at the woods, always questioning if May was real or did my dad actually die. I always stare into the woods, hoping I can see the field of flowers again. My second week of living alone, questioning life, I went out on the back deck again, my usual nightly ritual, and to my extreme surprise, when I opened the back door, there laid 14 red roses and 5 lilies. Thank you for venturing into the darkness with us. If you dare to explore further, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more spine-tingling tales of horror and the supernatural. Remember, the shadows hold endless mysteries, waiting to be unveiled. Stay tuned for more bone-chilling stories as we continue to traverse the eerie depths of the unknown together. Until next time, may your dreams be free from the haunting echoes of our tales. Or perhaps not.